Chapter 49. According to the records of the Sorcerer Continent, there were 31 regions under the jurisdiction of the Wizard Association in the central region of the Sorcerer Continent. The smaller ones were 700,000 to 800,000 square kilometers, while the larger ones were millions of square kilometers. The regions were vast and rich in resources. The population of these regions accounted for more than 60% of the Sorcerer Continent. Grimm's mission point was located in the Kreela Mountains in the northeast corner of the Dagon region. Ever since an entrance to the subterranean world had been discovered, the Scattered Tower Forest Magus Association had built a Magus Tower near the entrance and stationed a powerful Tier 2 Magus there to oversee it. One shouldn't think that a Tier 2 wizard was not qualified to take on important tasks just because they were at the bottom of the Tier 9 wizard system. In fact, in the Sorcerer Continent, where the sorcerer community originated, the highest wizard that one could come into contact with was a Tier 4 wizard. Even the top wizards of the three major wizard organizations and the Scattered Wizard Association of Talon were all at Grade 4. As for the higher wizards, it was said that they had already left the sorcerer world to explore and conquer the vast and boundless starry world. This was why the current power structure of the Sorcerer Continent was like this. Tier 1 wizards were frantically collecting knowledge to enrich themselves. They were also the largest group among the major forces. Tier 2 wizards were the backbone of the various academies. Most of them were already independent. As for Tier 3 wizards, they could already gather a group of followers and establish a small wizard organization or family. Tier 4 wizards were the core combat power that the major forces desperately tried to recruit. Of course, if this Tier 4 sorcerer wanted to, he could also establish a sorcerer kingdom of his own. The ranking of the wizard organizations and forces was actually based on the number of Tier 4 wizards they had. The Dark Crypt exploration mission that Grimm had accepted involved a group of fallen sorcerers, and the strongest among them was only a Tier 2 sorcerer. Therefore, the Wizard Association could send a Tier 2 sorcerer and the Wizard Tower to defend against any possible surprise attacks for fallen sorcerers. However, an apprentice like Grimm could not participate in the war between fallen wizards. Therefore, his mission was to investigate the distribution and changes of the underground creatures, as well as the possible movements of the fallen wizards. It was unknown whether it was intentional or not, but the ones who were the most active on the surface of the Dark Crypt were the sorcerer apprentices cultivated by the fallen sorcerers. The Scattered Tower Forest Sorcerer Association rarely sent out official sorcerers, and the ones in charge of missions were mostly sorcerer apprentices. Therefore, it was no surprise that it had become the front line where the two sides fought and killed each other. Bloody and brutal battles occurred almost every day. But on the other hand, a large number of potential sorcerer apprentices had experienced the watering of blood and honed the ruthlessness and callousness that a combat sorcerer should have. When the airship slowly landed near the mission point, Grimm was a little shocked. The quest point was actually a small city, which was a little out of his expectations. However, considering that this place was close to the Dark Crypt, it was not strange for so many merchant guilds and secret merchants to gather here from time to time. The airship landed in a large square outside the city. Waiting there was a fierce-looking man who reeked of blood. Judging from his spirit wave, he should be a high-ranked apprentice. Seeing the 5 people walking down from the airship, the man revealed an indescribably strange smile. He looked like a veteran who saw weak rookies and was proud and disdainful. However, when he saw the strong sorcerer jump down from the airship, he immediately put away his inappropriate expression and bowed respectfully. All right, don't bother. I've sent you a batch of sorcerer apprentices, so you have to use them carefully. The next batch will be in 2 months. If you go too far and make any mistakes, you'll have to be careful of the association's punishment. The muscular man waved his hand casually and chased the remaining 5 people off the airship like he was coaxing a bunch of chicks. Don't worry, Mr. Samir. Recently, the underground has been quieter than usual. It's been half a month since the patrol team met those black bastards. The Black Magnolia and Night Eye Stone that you asked for last time have also been prepared. They're just waiting for you to check. The fierce face of the male apprentice revealed a flattering smile. At this moment, Grim and the others realized that this wizard who came along with the airship was called Sam Muir. Okay, you can settle down these new wizard apprentices first. I'll go take a look around the city. Once you're done, go find me at Old Chris's place. Without waiting for the male wizard apprentice to reply, Wizard Samir had already strode away. He bowed and watched Lord Samir leave. When Lord Samir was out of sight, the fierce-looking male acolyte straightened his back. "All of you come with me." The male wizard apprentice quickly glanced at the 5 people. When he saw the 2 quasi-wizards, his expression did not change. But when he saw Grim, he slightly frowned. "My name is Kevin. You can call me Kevin the Black Hand." It was a simple introduction, but from his arrogant tone, it seemed like he cared more about his title than his name. "Kevin the Black Hand? Don't tell me you have a brother called White Hand?" A young man wearing a short yellow robe with a full set of wizard artifacts on his exposed skin could not help but speak with a confident tone. He was also one of the 2 quasi-wizards. Obviously, he was unhappy that this Kevin the Black Hand did not show any special respect to them. However, what he did not expect was that Kevin the Black Hand had already made his move as soon as the fierce look appeared on his face. The moment he turned hostile, Kevin the Black Hand disappeared on the spot. In the next second, a hazy, illusory figure appeared behind the young quasi-wizard and fiercely pounced towards him with 2 daggers in his hands. With the 20 points of spiritual force of a quasi-wizard, any change in the environment within 10 meters could not escape his senses. Although he was shocked by his opponent's decisive attack, it did not stop the young quasi-wizard from quickly retaliating. With a series of crackling sounds of thunder, a blue lightning defense net appeared behind him. The quasi-sorcerer calmly turned around and shot out 2 thick bolts of lightning from his hands towards the paralyzed apprentice. At the moment he made his move, there was a hint of hesitation. It was his first time in this unfamiliar environment, and he killed his teammate on the first day. Although it was his opponent who made the first move, it would be troublesome if he pursued the matter. Just as he was wondering if he should reduce the intensity of the lightning bombardment, a sharp pain came from his back. A pitch-black dagger pierced through his body and revealed the tip of the dagger in front of his chest. At this moment, the blurry figure struggling in the lightning net turned into a mirror and shattered in front of him. At the same time, a cold and sinister hoarse voice sounded in his ears. "Here, a quasi-wizard doesn't mean anything. Remember, don't joke around with others." With that, Kevin the Black Hand pulled out the dagger from the young quasi-wizard's body and took 2 steps back, staring at him coldly. The young quasi-wizard was sweating profusely from the pain, but what scared him even more was Kevin the Black Hand's unpredictability. He endured the pain and took out a bottle of purple potion from his waist pouch. He poured half of it into his mouth and the other half onto the wound on his chest. Speaking of which, it was strange. In just a few moments, the wound that had pierced through his chest began to close up and form a scab. As the young quasi-wizard wiped it, the scab fell off, revealing the smooth, white skin underneath. "Bloody Mary," Kevin the Black Hand whistled. "You quasi-wizards sure have a lot of good stuff on you. Looks like I should have given you a bigger one when I opened my mouth. Now do you know why I'm called Kevin the Black Hand? That's because I like to attack people behind their backs. Next time you want to cause trouble, remember to watch your back." The young quasi-wizard gritted his teeth after suffering a great loss, but he had no intention of provoking Kevin again. On the other hand, the quasi-shaman who was traveling with him frowned deeply. It was obvious that he was intimidated by the viciousness of this place. However, what truly shocked the two was not Kevin's ruthlessness, but his strange methods. First of all, it was definitely not a space-type attack, or else they would have sensed the ripples in space. Secondly, it could not have been a doppelganger attack, because Kevin's main body had appeared without warning. The phantom that he was using as bait could also sense Kevin's spiritual ripples. Otherwise, how could the young quasi-wizard be tricked so easily? For a moment, everyone eliminated countless possibilities in their minds. They could not figure out how Kevin the Black Hand had done it. As a high-level apprentice, Kevin had easily defeated a quasi-wizard. Part of the reason was the element of surprise, but more of it was because of Kevin the Black Hand's strange and unpredictable sorcery. Before figuring out his opponent's background, the young quasi-wizard did not plan to let himself become someone else's touchstone. Red Shirt Mary was also an agile close combat assassin, but even with her dynamic vision, she could not capture Kevin the Black Hand's movements. She could not help but frown deeply. While her mind was in a mess, Grim gently pulled her arm and mouthed the word illusion. Perhaps Grim was the only one who saw everything clearly in that short exchange of blows. Kevin the Black Hand's innate sorcery ability was the rare illusion. Unlike other apprentices who strive for greater and more powerful sorcery, Kevin the Black Hand paid more attention to the combination of his innate sorcery and his own combat power. Under the illusion that could confuse the enemy's senses, he did not leave his original position at all. Instead, he used the illusion to hide himself. When a young quasi-wizard was tricked by the phantom behind him, he exposed his unguarded back to Kevin, who was also an agile assassin. Judging from the speed of his movements, Kevin the Black Hand's agility was only second to Red Shirt Mary, probably between 13 to 15 points. If this guy ran at full speed, Grim would not even be able to see where Kevin was without elemental vision, let alone defend himself in time. Chapter 50. Grim and the others were led by Kevin the Black Hand into a simple stone room on the first floor of the Magus Tower. Only then did they meet the other members of the mission. There were 3 prospective magi among the 10 apprentices participating in the gloomy crypt mission. They were Leo from the Mushroom Forest in the Lofinhi area, Sabrina from the Tracy family in the Woodrow area, and Marcus from the Black Forest Academy in the Sydney area. Leo was the young prospective magus who was injured after provoking him. The 6 senior apprentices were Sheila, female, Matthew, Linder, Mary, female, Isaac, and Bruce. 4 men and 2 women came from different families in different regions. The direction of magic they studied was also very different, but now they were all gathered here for the same reason. As for Grim, the only junior apprentice, he was excluded from the conversation, as if he did not exist. As a member of the 10-man mission team, Grim's appearance would undoubtedly lower their overall strength, so it would be strange if they treated him nicely. Grim had no way of explaining why he was here, so he could only listen quietly and use the eye chip to secretly collect basic information. The 10 apprentices had arrived on 3 different airships. The first few had arrived 2 days ago. Thus, after spending a few days in the Magus Tower, they were relatively familiar with the place. Thus, they gave a simple explanation of the specific situation of this mission point. However, while they were talking, a middle-aged male magus in a white robe and a pointed hat hurriedly walked into the stone room. "Looks like you're all here." That's good. This saves me the trouble of explaining it a second time. Why is there a junior apprentice here? All right, this must be a mistake made by those old bastards from the association. He. Since you're here, just accept your fate. Those Claws Terror in the subterranean world are going to have a good meal. After saying this, he let out a creepy sneer, but obviously no one dared to refute his crazy words. All right. Seems like you're all a bunch of boring fellows. None of you dare to cause trouble. However, this was also good. It would save him the trouble of losing his life in the dark underground because of his arrogance. The entire mission period is 6 months. You will form a team of 10, and you will need to patrol the underground every 15 days. Each time, there will be about 5 locations that must be patrolled, located in different locations underground. So, if you don't want anything to happen to you, it's best if the 10 of you stay together and patrol these 5 mission points according to the prescribed route. If you move fast, you can patrol the area once every 5 days. That way, you can have 5 days to rest. Of course, you can also split up. If you move fast, you can finish the inspection in 2 days. But once you meet those black bastards underground, you can only pray for your own fate. He. His words made the 10 people's faces turn ugly, and the middle-aged magus finally introduced himself. My name is Angus. In the future, you can find me at my residence when you hand in your missions. Remember, if you encounter any danger underground, you can only rely on yourself. No one will come to your rescue. If you're lucky and manage to kill those blind bastards, remember to bring their heads back. You can exchange them for a reward for me." Faced with a group of silent sorcerer apprentices, this wizard Angus was not interested in explaining too much. He turned around and left in a hurry. There were no outsiders in the room. The 10 mission apprentices who were forced together by the mission could only sit down again and began to discuss how to complete the mission. The young female prospective sorcerer, Sabrina, who arrived 2 days earlier, became everyone's biggest source of information. She introduced the mission in more detail. This was a female sorcerer apprentice with waist-length black hair. Half of her face was covered by a silver mask that covered the left side of her face. Only the right side of her face was exposed. She looked like a beauty. However, what was strange was that her left eye and the exposed left hand under the mask were replaced by mechanical organs. When she moved, there was a metallic sound unique to mechanical creatures. The 5 mission points that the Sorcerer Tower arranged for them were all located on the shallow surface of the dark cave. The deepest point was no more than 10 miles underground. If this distance was on the surface, a few prospective sorcerers might be able to complete the inspection in less than a quarter of an hour. However, in the underground world, this was a distance that would make people flinch. From the cave entrance to the last mission point, there was a straight line distance of 10 miles. However, there were rugged mines, tunnels, rifts, and cracks everywhere. Apart from some barely safe roads that were explored, the underground was full of winding tunnels. If they followed the explored route, they would encounter a lot fewer underground creatures on the way. If they were to wander around in there, they might not end up well. In 3 days, it will be our team's turn to patrol the underground for the first time. So, we must discuss a specific plan today so that everyone can make the corresponding preparations. Sabrina ended her speech with such a sentence, which made everyone frown deeply. 3 days? That's a short time. Everyone, don't forget that we still have some burdens in this team. The male apprentice named Isaac glanced at Grimm with dissatisfaction. It was obvious that he was unhappy with Grimm for dragging down the strength of the team. He's someone I brought, and I'm responsible for his safety. Mary's green eyes suddenly lit up. She stared at Isaac and said in a cold and harsh tone, "Then I suggest that we split up the mission and let this beautiful lady take her night along the way. This way, the efficiency of carrying out the mission will be higher, and it will give us more time to study and rest." Isaac sneered. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Sabrina shook her head and said, "Don't think that you can get rid of the burdens this way. Since we're a team, we have to plan the overall situation. There are 5 patrol missions each time. If we fail 2, the reward will be halved, and if we fail 3, there will be no reward. If 2 people are responsible for 1 mission point, the time will indeed be much faster. However, if a team is too weak, they may not be able to come back." "What? You feel sorry for this rookie?" Isaac was obviously planning to be the black guy until the end. "Of course I don't feel sorry for him. But that also means that in the next round, we will need 8 people to do the work of 10 people. In the next round, we may need 6 people to do the work of 10 people. At this rate, no matter how strong you are, you will only be able to waste all your time running underground in the end," Sabrina said coldly. It was obvious that she had studied this mission in depth over the past 2 days and had done a detailed analysis of the hidden traps within. What a dilemma. If the whole team carried out the mission together, as the 5 mission points were relatively scattered, running back and forth would definitely be unavoidable, and it would also waste time. However, there was strength in numbers, and it would not be easy to encounter danger. If they split up, it would inevitably dilute the overall strength of the team. If they were unlucky and 1 or 2 teams were wiped out, then the remaining few months would be difficult. For a moment, everyone fell into deep thought. Even Isaac, who had been pretending to be black, was silent. A simple mission flow not only needed to consider the time efficiency, but also the balance of strength. Otherwise, even if a quasi-sorcerer thought that he was extremely strong, it would be difficult for him to complete such a complicated mission alone after he caused the death of his companion. After all, it was underground. No matter how strong a person was, they would not be able to endure for 7 to 8 days without rest. Roaming the underground alone was not as easy as being in a group of people who were on guard against each other. Therefore, the Sorcerer Association set up such a mission to test their ability to work together and also to test their individual strength. Let's split up. Everyone came here to train and improve themselves, not to covet a smooth and stable mission period. Mary and I will be in charge of one mission point, and I'm confident that I can complete it. Grim calmly said what everyone wanted to say the most. As soon as he spoke, many people secretly heaved a sigh of relief. After all, in the dark and treacherous underground world, even the three quasi-sorcerers would have a headache with a burden that needed to be taken care of. All right, then it's settled. Everyone, use these 2 days to have a good rest and prepare the things you'll need for the journey. We'll gather here in 3 days. The three quasi-sorcerers could not help but glance at Grim a few times, and once again confirmed that he was a beginner's spiritual wave. Sabrina obviously wanted to be the leader of this team, and decisively decided on the final plan. Everyone silently nodded and split up to leave the stone room. When only the two of them were left in the room, Mary smiled faintly and asked, "Are you so sure that I'm willing to team up with you?" "Hee, you want the blood, and I want the crystal core. The other materials are different. This way, there will be no conflict, and it's mutually beneficial. It's good for both of us." Grim extended his right hand. If I want to pick the loot first." Mary's soft and fragrant hand shook Grim's lightly, and then she arrogantly turned around and left the stone room. She only had 3 days, and she needed to prepare something suitable for herself. After becoming an acolyte, this was the first time she had left the magic swamp, and Mary planned to have a good look around. After the room was completely silent, Grim pretended to close his eyes and silently pondered, but in reality, he was communicating with the AI chip in his mind. "AI, chip, have you collected the data of those people?" Beep. Data collection complete. The list of data is as follows. With a strange buzzing sound, a series of data flowed into his mind. Magus Angus, data, none. Sabrina, female, Quasimagus, arcane magus, estimated, data, none. Leo, male, Quasimagus, law-defying magus, estimated, data, 7 agility, 6 vitality, 7 spirit. 20 Marcus, male, Quasimagus, data, none. The rest of the list showed no basic data. Chapter 51. The dark and serene underground tunnel was completely silent. There were no roads in the underground world, only zigzagging rock cracks and waterways eroded by thousands of years of water. However, after the hard work of countless generations of underground creatures, the underground caverns, karst caves, and caves of various sizes were connected by tunnels of various lengths. Only then did they form the astounding three-dimensional tunnels that extended in all directions in the underground world. There were no straight roads like the ones on the surface. All the tunnels were cleverly opened along the cracks in the rock, along the old waterways, twisting and turning. Sometimes, there was a thick rock stratum that was less than 10 meters away from the next cave, but they could only reach it by meandering for dozens of miles in the pitch-black tunnel. There were countless stalactites hanging from the top of the cave, and there were also some tooth-like protrusions on the ground. Water droplets dripped from between the rocks, and the ground was covered with slippery lichens. To be honest, walking in such a closed and quiet environment, it was easy to feel the fear of being crushed to death by the hundreds of tons of mud and rocks above their heads. Grim and his team of 10 held torches, lined up in a long line, and walked slowly in the underground tunnel. The light from the torches could only illuminate a narrow area less than 5 meters wide, and the hidden cracks in the cave wall blew out gusts of cold wind. The torches flickered and flickered, projecting their shadows onto the stone wall. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws like twisted demons. Even though they tried their best to maintain silence as they walked, the rustling of their footsteps and the sound of their bodies rubbing against the cave wall spread far and wide in the deep and dark tunnel. This would bring a lot of unexpected dangers to their journey. After walking for 3 hours, they finally came to the first stop on the patrol route. Seriously speaking, This 3-hour journey was just a small trial before they entered the dark crypt. From here, it was the real starting point of their patrol mission. Well, it's time for us to part ways here. Everyone should try to finish the mission as soon as possible and return here to gather. I hope you have a smooth journey. Sabrina's clear voice sounded muffled in the stuffy cave. 10 wizard apprentices, 5 teams, went to different areas to complete their own missions. Sabrina and Sheila's team were in charge of the mission in the deepest part of the underground. No one objected to her taking the most dangerous mission, so they tacitly agreed to her leadership. As for Mary and Grimm's team, although they were not happy, they could only give them the easiest mission. After all, their momentary gratification this time had harmed them. Next time, the team could only have 8 people do the work of 10 people. Everyone wore thick black robes that covered all of their skin to prevent their breath and body temperature from being exposed to the eyes of the underground creatures that had infrared vision. After giving their blessings to each other, the 5 squads disappeared into the darkness outside the cave, heading towards different targets. After they parted ways, Grimm stopped after walking for less than a quarter of an hour in the dark tunnel. After listening attentively for a while and not hearing any movement in the distance, Grimm extinguished the torch in his hand. When the last ray of light disappeared into the darkness, a strange world appeared in front of Grimm's eyes. The fluorescent moss that grew on the walls of the cave glowed coldly in the deep darkness. In Grimm's eyes, which had temporarily gained the ability to see in the low light, it was a completely different and strange scene. Under the dim light, the darkness was slowly fading away, and in its place was a magical green world. The gloomy and cold rock walls were black, and the area where the water gathered was gray. In Grimm's strange vision, apart from a large area of green light, there was also a large area of gray and black. However, in a dark corner far away, he could vaguely see 1 or 2 strange red dots crawling. The red dots indicated that there was life energy leaking out. Judging from the size of the red dots, they should be small creatures like rock scorpions or geckos. Grimm tilted his head and looked. Red Dress Mary was still wearing a bright red dress, exposing a large area of her soft white skin. But strangely, even though Grimm was only 3 steps away from her, he could not detect the unique temperature of a life form. If he only relied on his infrared vision, Mary would probably be no different from a human-shaped stalagmite in his eyes. All right. The methods of a vampire were indeed unpredictable. With infrared vision, the concealment of life energy, and high agility, this dark and gloomy underground world was indeed suitable for agile assassins like them. Grimm pulled up his hood and took the lead, following the winding and rugged path downwards. Their mission point was near an underground pool 7 miles away. Along the way, they might pass by 2 or 3 habitats of underground creatures, but they were not much of a threat. As long as they were careful, they would not have a problem passing through unscathed. Although they had powerful sorcery abilities, in this dangerous underground world, even a high-level apprentice like Mary was just a toddler learning to walk. Grimm, who thought he was ready, had not even walked 100 meters when he encountered his first ambush in the underground world. Yes, it was an ambush. A rock python that was curled up in a crack in the rock wall suddenly pounced out the moment Grimm passed by. The python's fierce fangs bit towards Grimm's neck without hesitation. He was caught off guard, really caught off guard. The cold rock wall concealed the weak life energy of the rock python. When Grimm saw a red dot expanding in front of him, the venomous fangs of the rock python were just inches away from him. If Grimm had more than 10 points of agility, he might have been able to react, but 4 points of agility severely limited his instincts. He could only close his eyes in horror and wait for the ferocious bite. A rock python could not bite him to death, but he could not avoid the pain of the flesh. Asterisk screech. Asterisk, a sharp wind-breaking sound rang in his ears. Mary, who was clearly following behind him, appeared in front of him in the next second. Her fingers were like knives, and the sound of wind breaking could be heard incessantly. The rock python was actually cut into 7 pieces in an instant. An unpleasant smell of blood began to spread in the tunnel. Grim took a few deep breaths to calm his restless heart. His body was sticky with cold sweat. These damn underground creatures, they were so good at picking ambushes. Although the tunnel was dark, Grim's cheeks were faintly burning. Too careless, too careless. Theoretical knowledge was just theoretical knowledge. He thought that he had stored so many adventure skills and experiences in his head, but in reality, there were still so many unexpected traps in life. After the twists and turns, the two of them changed positions. Mary, who was wearing a red dress, walked in front of them lightly and silently. Any underground creature that came out of hiding could not avoid her sharp claws that were as sharp as magic weapons. Even if it was a surprise attack from close range, she could use her super high agility to cut the enemy into several pieces. Therefore, in just an hour, 11 underground creatures had died in her hands. Grim could vaguely hear the roars of creatures fighting for food coming from the tunnel behind him. It seemed that a small battle was inevitable. In the underground world, making unnecessary sounds or having wounds on one's body was a big taboo, as it could easily attract bigger and more ferocious underground creatures. Although with Mary and Grim's strength, they would not be afraid of such small characters. It would bring unnecessary trouble to their journey. The first real trouble occurred in the 7th hour after they entered the underground. A group of 11 clawed deinoids attacked them. The clawed deinoids, which were widely distributed in the underground, looked like a small dinosaur covered in biological scales. When they stood up, they were only 2 meters tall. Although they were not huge, their bones were thick and their bodies were densely covered in scales. Their huge mouths were filled with 2 rows of thick, sharp fangs that shone with a cold light. Sticky saliva dripped from their mouths as if they were ready to feast. They did not choose to launch a sneak attack like the small underground creatures. Instead, they waited for Grim and Mary to enter their encirclement before walking out of the darkness with steady steps. Before he could see their bodies, Grim saw a pair of dim yellow eyes. These hard-skinned monsters were not easy to deal with. At least, Mary's sharp claws could not break through the dense scales on their bodies. As long as she did not attack the weak points such as armpits, eye sockets, and neck, Mary's attacks would not hurt them at all. On the other hand, the pair of slender and sharp upper limbs on their chests could inflict terrible damage on her. Coupled with the impact of their heavy bodies and the special paralysis effect of earth magic beasts, ordinary apprentices would not be able to escape unscathed in such a narrow area. Shaking his head with a bitter smile, Grim took out 2 summoning crystals and threw them on the ground nearby. Although most of the underground tunnels were dug into hard rock walls to prevent the tunnel from collapsing, there was still mud and gravel everywhere. Therefore, Grim's earth magic puppet was not lacking in shaping materials. A silent roar sounded, and the crocodile hunter slowly appeared beside Grim. "Hey kid, you still have a trick up your sleeve." Red Robe Mary's voice came from the darkness. With Mary's 17 points of agility, it was easy for her to get rid of the clawed deinoids. If it was not for Grim's burden, Mary would only need 5 seconds to break through the enemy's simple encirclement. After randomly attacking a few of the clawed deinoids without any results, Mary could only give up. She slipped back to Grim's side and carefully observed the new puppet. "This seems a little different from the last time I saw it. Could this mud crocodile be the new puppet he obtained after killing the swamp crocodile king? It seems that this kid is not as weak as I thought." Chapter 52. All along the way, he was invincible. It had to be said that the size of the demon crocodile hunters had already entered the category of large creatures, while the ferocious claw terror were only medium-sized creatures. Between magical beasts and magical creatures that relied on strength to win, size was undoubtedly the most direct way to display strength. These terror claw monsters that Mary couldn't deal with were like little white rabbits struggling on their deathbed when faced with the demon crocodile hunters. They were flipped over by the demon crocodiles one by one, and then torn into pieces by the demon crocodiles. The high and mighty native hunters held long spears in their hands and continuously threw them outwards, knocking down the claw terror that pounced at them. since they were all Earth-type creatures. Although the Earth damage from the Earth spears was negated, the wild physical damage was not. Thus, the Claw Terror that was still charging forward were nailed to the ground by the Earth spears. They could only struggle futilely and roar in a low voice. A few Claw Terror that were lucky enough to reach the side of the demon crocodiles charged forward and unleashed their most ferocious attacks on the thick mud armor of the demon crocodiles. With their ferocious biting and clawing, mud and gravel fell in pieces. But every once in a while, a yellow elemental halo would sweep across, and a new layer of mud armor would appear on the demon crocodiles' bodies. The high and mighty hunter would not let these enemies who wanted to destroy the demon crocodiles' bodies go. The earth spears that were shot at close range directly pierced through their skulls, causing the Claw Terror to wail and fall on the battlefield. In just the time it took to drink a cup of tea, this unlucky group of Claw Terror fell under the butcher knife of the demon crocodile hunters. After cleaning up the battlefield, the group of Claw Terror that had died miserably was once again looked down upon by Grimm. In such a large group of vagabonds, there wasn't even a single person with a magical beast core. After hastily harvesting some of the Claw Terror's sharp claws, Grimm and Mary rode on the demon crocodile and swaggered into the depths of the underground. The broken corpses of the Claw Terror that were left behind would be devoured by the underground creatures that followed the smell in less than half a day. In the underground world where food was scarce, anything that could be swallowed would not be wasted. There were plenty of nature cleaners who roamed the dark and deep caves in search of food. But what Grimm didn't expect was that not long after they left the battlefield, a short stalagmite at the edge of the cave shook, and a strange humanoid figure with stone-like skin suddenly stood up. The stone man's eyes were hollow, as if he was a dead thing. He faced the direction where Grimm and the others had disappeared. A strange fluctuation was emitted from his body, which quickly spread into the distance through a secret channel. After all the information had been transmitted, the stone man slowly and painstakingly pieced together again, returning to its original appearance of a short stalagmite. There were no longer any flaws in its appearance. Such a strange life form, even if Grimm wanted to find it, he would not be able to identify it. Deep underground, in a secret cave, the crackling bonfire was burning fiercely, warming the secret cave. For strange figures in black robes were gathered around the bonfire, silently waiting for something. At the entrance of the cave, there was a dense and transparent light barrier that blocked all auras from leaking out. Suddenly, a strange croak came from one of the figures. It was obviously a woman, judging from a slender palm she extended out of her robe. An extremely ugly toad was crouching in her palm, making an ear-piercing croak with its huge and translucent belly. There's movement at position number 7. Together with positions 4 and 5 that were triggered earlier, we can conclude that it's the group on the other side. The woman finally spoke. Kakik, I just received news that they're going to bring a group of chickens, and today we found them. They're really a group of fearless noobs. Since the time when the information was triggered was so close, it means that they've split up. Kakik, this is the best news I've heard today. A sinister sneer came from under another black robe. Can you determine the strength of each team? I heard that there are quite a few quasi-sorcerers in their team. My corpse puppet is only missing a quasi-sorcerer's soul. Another black robe spoke. Judging from his arrogant attitude, he was obviously the leader of the team. Correspondingly, the treacherous and terrifying tone in his voice was the strongest. It's very difficult to determine. After all, active spying methods can be easily detected, so the information sent back this time only shows that there are creatures that fit the set conditions. We can't determine their specific strength and number. The one who answered was the woman from before. As long as they split up, they're not far from death. Based on their past behavior, it's very likely that they're in groups of 2, or most 3. We have 3 quasi-sorcerers in our group. Are we afraid that we can't take down a small team? The leader of the black robes laughed sinisterly. Let's go to Area 4 first. It's the closest. If it's successful, we'll go to the other areas and try to wipe out a few more groups. Let's go. The group of black robes were all decisive and ruthless people. After a few words of discussion, They abandoned the temporary camp and entered the endless darkness outside the cave. Grim, who knew nothing about the danger in the distance, was currently living a relaxed and contented life. With the help of the demon crocodile hunters, he and Mary did not need to do much to wipe out the underground creatures that constantly pounced out of the darkness. As they advanced, they crushed everything in their way, turning this extremely dangerous mission into a leisurely sightseeing trip. However, what made him feel extremely emotional was that the underground world was indeed a place where there were many different species and messy bloodlines. These underground creatures were even more ferocious and cruel than the ones on the surface. Sometimes, even though they knew that they were no match for them, they still charged at Grim and his group without a care for their own safety. The weaker ones were nailed to death by the native hunters' spears when they were far away, while the stronger ones were stomped into meat paste by the demon crocodile's sharp and thick forelimbs before they could even bite through the earth armor of the demon crocodile's body. Against a giant creature that could absorb earth elements from its surroundings to heal itself, their attacks were not enough to threaten it at all. In order to deal with the demon crocodile, one had to either use a terrifying witchcraft to destroy the summoning crystal core hidden deep within its body, or use an endless stream of attacks to break its hard shell. The petite creatures of the underground world couldn't do both of these. This was actually related to the environment they lived in. The underground world was mostly filled with long, narrow tunnels and caves. The ground was densely covered with stalagmites, and countless stalactites hung upside down from the cave ceiling. In this environment, there were two disadvantages to being too big. First, it was difficult to find enough food, and second, it was difficult to pass through all terrains without any obstacles. Therefore, in order to adapt to the environment, most of the underground creatures had evolved to be cold-blooded and cruel, but their bodies were short and flat. Suddenly encountering such a huge demon crocodile would naturally cause them to be at a disadvantage in terms of strength and physique. As a puppet creature condensed from the earth element, the height and size of the demon crocodile's body were directly controlled by the crystal core in its body. When there was a need to fight, a huge body was naturally the most advantageous. And when there was a need to pass through the underground, it could constantly adjust its body according to the characteristics of the tunnel in front of it. When faced with some narrow and rugged tunnels, it could even shape itself into a huge rock python that slithered along the ground and easily passed through. With such a self-walking demon crocodile, the two masters only needed to sit steadily and pass through one cave after another. Was there anything more relaxing in this world? In order to pass through the long and lonely journey in the dark, Grim and Mary even lit torches on the crocodile's back and studied their own witchcraft topics out of boredom. As for those blind underground creatures, they would leave them to the loyal and dutiful demon crocodile hunters. As a result, they only spent 7 hours to reach the destination, which was supposed to take them 17 hours to complete. It was a huge karst cave filled with strangely shaped stalactites. In a low-lying corner of the karst cave, underground water flowed down from the cave wall and converged into a pool. Therefore, this place had become a lively place where the surrounding underground creatures often appeared. Stopping in the dark karst cave, the demon crocodile's huge body looked even more ferocious and terrifying under the flickering light of the torches. Most of the underground creatures that were drinking water here were so frightened that they hid. Only a few creatures that had yet to develop enough intelligence charged at them and died there. A pair of soft, thick, and waterproof black deerskin boots stepped on a muddy and slippery stone path. Grim walked down from the demon crocodile and pulled down his hood. His eyes, which were wearing strange goggles, slowly examined the mission location in front of him. It was unexpectedly calm. How could this kind of mission be called a red mission? But before he could continue his doubts, a gentle female voice suddenly came from behind him. As an elegant man, shouldn't you wait on a beautiful lady to get off the car? Grim shuddered as he was frightened by Mary's terrifying voice. To be honest, he had seen Mary's ferocious figure in battle many times. Now that she suddenly pretended to be an elegant lady in front of him, it was obvious that she was bored and wanted to tease him again. After interacting with her for so long, he could be considered to have understood Mary's temperament. She was an extremely dangerous and injured girl who had a strong distrust of the outside world. Grimm didn't know how Red Dress Mary survived Wizard Anderson's scary witchcraft research, but he was sure that Red Dress Mary had a split personality. One was the shy and introverted female wizard apprentice Mary, and the other was the twisted and cruel female vampire Mary. Two completely opposite personalities were squeezed into Red Dress Mary, who was full of insecurity. She was like a psychologically twisted and perverted lady. On one hand, she wanted to use her beauty and sexiness to captivate others, but on the other hand, she couldn't suppress the desire for blood in her heart. She wanted to tear everyone into pieces and sprinkle blood all over her body. Therefore, her actions always wavered between seduction and cruelty. A little carelessness could trigger the pain in her heart and turn her into the blood queen of her dreams. Chapter 53. The biggest advantage of having the AI chip was its vast knowledge. After a short pause, the AI chip had already picked out the most suitable set of etiquette from countless human nobles and projected it into Grimm's mind. Grimm bowed respectfully and half-knelt in front of Mary. She held his hand and stepped on his knee to get off the magic crocodile. Mary was obviously very satisfied with Grimm's tactfulness. She turned around gracefully, her soft and beautiful red dress accentuating her soft and tender skin. Under the dim light of the torches, her skin was dazzling. The environment here is not bad. Let me take a bath. Then I'll have to trouble the noble knight to guard the perimeter, Mary commanded, looking like a noble lady with her head held high. Everything is as you wish. Grimm was obviously more familiar with this kind of little girl role-playing game than Mary. After placing his hand on his chest and bowing, he left the vicinity of the pool and led the magic crocodile hunter to patrol the surroundings. They were here to complete a mission, and the mission point was in the pool. So, after leaving Mary at the pool, Grimm could not help but look for the greatest benefit of this trip. The reason why the Gloomy Crypt was so famous was because it produced some special resources that could not be found on the surface. For example, the ghost mushroom. The ghost mushroom was a white mushroom with a body that was in between a solid and incorporeal form. It was one of the main ingredients for making invisibility potions and enchantments for the Shadow's youth. This kind of ghost mushroom liked the shade and could devour negative energy, so it was often associated with spirits. Normal people would not be able to see it. Only acolytes with extraordinary strength like Grimm had the right to mine it. Before coming here, the Magus Angus who had given them the mission had specifically mentioned this. If the acolytes could mine some ghost mushrooms while completing their mission, he could buy them at a decent price. From this, Grimm was certain that the Magus Angus was also a potioneering master. Therefore, Grimm was very enthusiastic about this kind of work that he could do along the way. After all, he had used up all the resources he had in the past few years for this trip. At this moment, apart from some essential casting materials and travel items, the only wealth he had in his pouch was the 3 magical crystals. This amount of magical crystals couldn't buy anything good here. While Grimm was walking further and further away, Mary had already arrived at the edge of the pond with light steps. In the dark and quiet depths of the underground, everything was shrouded in oppressive, and boundless darkness. From time to time, some faintly discernible sounds could be heard, echoing in the twisting and winding karst cave. If it was an ordinary person, they would have already screamed in fright from the eerie and terrifying environment here. But Mary stuck the torch in a crack in the rock beside the pool and hummed a lively tune. With a slight shake of her shoulders, she took off her thin red dress, arched her perfectly curved feet to test the water, and then jumped in with a cheer. Water splashed everywhere, and a beautiful body was faintly discernible. If it wasn't for the limited environment, this place would definitely be a warm, charming, and beautiful fairyland. But just as Mary was happily playing in the water, A pair of strange eyes opened at a place on the top of the cave where the torches could not reach. This was clearly a pair of eyes belonging to an intelligent creature, and there was even a hint of confusion and wandering in its nimble movements. To be honest, in this dark underground world full of slaughter and blood, everything was separated from beauty and warmth. Although he had heard about the peaceful and free life on the surface from books and the oral accounts of travelers, he did not believe it at all. With the terrifying evil of human sorcerers, under their cruel and powerful rule, how could humans on the surface have so-called freedom and peace? All of this must be a lie spread by the sorcerers to lure the cowardly clansmen into the trap. He who had this belief could not help but feel a little puzzled when he suddenly saw a beautiful girl swimming in the water in the hunting range. Having seen too many human sorcerer apprentices' cruelty, he had a strong intuition of danger towards sorcerer apprentices. Therefore, without a sound, he passed through the dark cave top, where the torches could not reach, and slowly moved towards the beautiful trap. His delicate and flexible body endowed him with far more dexterity than ordinary people. Even on the cave wall covered with slippery moss, he could move freely without making any sound. Like an 8-clawed spider hunting in the dark, he slipped to the surface through the cracks in the rock wall. Using the high and low stalagmites and stalactites as cover, he silently touched the edge of the pool. At this time, Mary had already finished swimming freely. She sat cross-legged on a blue stone at the edge of the pool, gently and slowly drying her long hair. Her long black hair was like a cloud hanging loosely on her body, covering the infinite beauty of her chest, making people feel deeply regretful. The human figure in the dark secretly touched the area where Mary had taken off her clothes. After searching for a long time, he did not find anything similar to a sorcerer's artifact or storage pouch. Could it be that she was not a sorcerer apprentice? Stealing a glance at that faintly discernible, beautiful body, he could not help but swallow his saliva in the dark, and his mind became a little active. Regardless of whether she was a sorcerer apprentice or not, if such a high-quality goods were to be transported to Blissful City, he would definitely be able to sell it for a good price. This way, he would no longer have to run around for the next 10 years, day and night, in this oppressive and maddening underground passage to make a living. The one who left just now was definitely a sorcerer apprentice, unexpectedly being able to control such a terrifying giant puppet beast. It was obviously not something an underground hunter like him could deal with. Moreover, this woman did not reveal any outstanding traits from beginning to end, and it was extremely likely that she was only a concubine brought along by that male sorcerer. If this was really the case, relying on his own skills, there was really a possibility that he could kidnap her. Making up his mind, the black figure hid behind the blue stone that Gango was leaning on and secretly opened the leather pouch at his waist. A green figure the size of a palm crawled out from inside and quickly crawled along the rugged rocks toward Gango. A moment later, following a delicate cry, the black figure quickly pounced out like lightning, and 2 dark green dull, curved knives were placed on Mary's neck at lightning speed. The small green lizard loosened its mouth and coiled around Mary's delicate body, constantly flicking its long tongue. It ruthlessly bit Mary's perky buttocks, and a small wound there was slowly flowing green juice. Her body was paralyzed, and she seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. The black figure had no choice but to let go of one of his hands to support Mary's crooked body. Otherwise, this naked beauty would have slipped into the pool. You have to support her properly. If you really break her skin, you will definitely end up very, very badly. A low but steady male voice suddenly sounded, and the black figure was truly startled. At some unknown time, Grimm had already returned from afar, and was leaning on a stalactite that led straight to the top of the cave, observing the scene in front of him with a face full of smiles. Behind him, the terrifying demon crocodile hunter was walking out of the darkness step by step, but strangely, there was not even a trace of the heavy footsteps that a large creature should have. This scene was clearly somewhat out of the black figure's expectations. He slid forward, and most of his body was curled up behind Mary's back, one hand holding the curved blade across her neck, the other grabbing her arm, as if the hostage was in his hands. What made him extremely surprised was that the male acolyte who had suddenly returned did not seem to have any intention of saving his female companion, but instead looked as if he was interested in watching a good show. "Her life is in my hands. You don't act rashly." The black figure spoke in the Saris language, which was different from the common human language, but this did not prevent Grimm from completely understanding what he was saying. With the help of the AI chip, language was probably the easiest subject for Grimm to learn. Grimm leaned against a rock pillar, observing everything in the field from afar. Mary's stunning and alluring body was especially pleasing to the eye, and he naturally would not let go of such an opportunity to openly admire it. Moreover, the sudden appearance of this underground creature also attracted his attention, and he continued to observe it. Beep, biological scan completed. Matching creature type found in the biological database. Would you like to display it? Display. Following the flow of data, information about the creature in front of him appeared in Grimm's mind. Lizardmen, one of the intelligent subterranean creatures. They had the bloodline of a lizard and a human, and were a type of mutated creature. These creatures usually had the ability to move stealthily, and they could freely control their body temperature. In the darkness of the subterranean world, they appeared as assassins in various large regions. Lizardmen? As Grimm sorted out the information in his mind, he silently matched the black figure in front of him with the information in his mind. The skinny humanoid body was not wearing any clothes, and its exposed skin was covered in dark green lumps and rough skin. The hand holding the curved blade only had 4 fingers, and between the fingers was a wrinkled, transparent membrane. The sharp nails were long and curved, like a sharp blade. The ugly face looked like a human, but it had the same facial features as a human. However, the skin was too dark, and the expression could not be seen clearly. The transparent eyelids opened and closed continuously, and the bulging eyes could freely focus and look in any direction. Judging from the voice, it should be a male. No, it should be a male. All right, let's not dwell on that. In short, this was an ugly fellow that Grimm hated the moment he saw him, especially when he recklessly went to kidnap Mary. Grimm added in his mind, if not for the great convenience given to him by the environment, a lizard man like this would only be at the level of an intermediate acolyte. Just him alone wanted to kidnap the terrifying red-dress Mary. Grimm had a faint smile on his face. He really did not know if he should mourn for his luck or misfortune. Chapter 54. Grimm's excessive calmness had obviously made the lizard man suspicious of the hostage in his hand. But before he could do anything, Mary, who was originally weak, moved first. Her fair and smooth body, like a swimming fish, twisted a few times and escaped from the lizardman's grasp. In a flash, Mary appeared behind the lizardman. The lizardman's limbs were numb, and his body drooped down as if he had lost the ability to resist. Only Grimm could clearly see that the lizardman's joints, such as his wrists and ankles, had traces of blood seeping out from the dark green scales. It was obvious that Mary had used her finger blades to cut off his tendons. This kind of injury would definitely cause an ordinary person to lose the ability to fight, but for a lizard man with a tenacious vitality and extraordinary recovery ability, it was only a minor injury. His limbs could not move, but he still had a big mouth full of jagged fangs. Unfortunately, Mary was hiding behind him, and the lizard man tried to bite him several times, but to no avail. Just as he was about to get rid of the terrifying woman behind him, his dark green body suddenly stiffened like a robot with a power cut. At this time, Mary smiled and pulled out the sharp finger blades that were inserted into the lizardman's spine. In close combat, Mary could directly cut off the lizardman's cervical vertebrae through the gaps between the lizardman's scales. At this moment, the lizardman had completely lost the ability to resist. What? Do you want to stay and see how we're going to do it? Mary teased Grimm, who had become a little embarrassed, while she wrapped herself around the lizard man and slowly moved her bright red mouth to his soft neck. Beauty and the Beast. The little green man versus the vampire. Grim clapped his hands and wanted to see this kind of drama up close. But when he thought of the heavy taste that was about to happen, he felt that it was wisest to temporarily avoid it. Unlike the vampire in his impression, who would gently stab their sharp teeth into the carotid artery of their lover, this red-dressed Mary obviously loved to bite. Grim was worried that he would lose his appetite after seeing such a horrible scene of blood mixed with broken tracheas and throats, so he could only resentfully turn around and leave. Just as he bypassed the stalactite, he heard the terrible sound of flesh tearing from behind. He could also hear Mary's neurotic nostrils and mouth, as well as the weak wail of the unfortunate soul before his death. Grim shuddered and quickened his pace. After half an hour, Mary finally walked out of the restaurant leisurely while tidying up her dress. Looking at her radiant appearance, it was hard for anyone to imagine what had happened in the past half an hour. "Have you finished sampling the mission points?" Grim closed his book after waiting for a long time. "Of course it's not a problem," Mary said proudly, tossing a rune crystal to Grim. Grim cast a spell to verify it before putting it into his waist pouch in satisfaction. At the bottom of the pool, there was a small witchcraft circle set up by the Wizards of the Association. 5 mission points corresponded to 5 nodes of the witchcraft circle. Periodically, the information of the witchcraft circle would be sampled back. Even if the wizards stayed in the wizard tower and did not take a step out, they would still be able to grasp the terrain and changes in the dark crypt during this period of time. Therefore, Grim's mission was to arrive at the mission point and use the special rune crystal to extract the information stored in the witchcraft circle. Apart from the missions, it was their free time to plunder and harvest rare resources. When the team split up, they agreed to meet up in 3 days, which was enough time for them to plunder the resources near the mission point. Therefore, the two only spent half a day completing the mission, so they could walk around freely in the remaining time. However, just as the two of them were leisurely strolling around, in another cavern 5 miles away from them, a soul-stirring battle had just begun. Leo from the Mushroom Forest in Lofinhi was running with all his might. Behind him, 2 black-robed acolytes with the strength of a prospective wizard were chasing him with all their might. As for the senior acolyte, Matthew, who was with Leo, he was nowhere to be found. It was likely that he was also in danger. Leo was indeed a young prospective wizard who was highly valued by his family. He had amazing talent in lightning spells that ordinary people could not hope to achieve. Although he was not known for his agility, he was surrounded by a layer of white wind particles, which made his body as light as a feather. Therefore, he could run faster than a galloping horse. If not for the twists and turns in the tunnel and the occasional stalagmite blocking the way, he would have long since escaped from his enemies. Every time he ran past a narrow area, he would gently pull his hands together and condense a ball of blue lightning between his palms. He would casually throw the lightning behind him and continue running without looking back. And in less than 10 seconds, there would be a series of furious curses and loud noises from the detonation of electric arcs behind him. Immediately after, 2 figures with charred bodies rushed out of the smoke and dust against the small lightning storm. Even though they were protected by witchcraft, the all-pervasive thunderbolts still tore the black robes they were wearing into pieces. The one on the right was wearing a pitch-black soft armor after his robe was torn to shreds. He held a snake-headed staff in his hand and had a pair of scarlet vertical pupils that made people feel fear. Are we still chasing him? This guy looks like he's hard to deal with. The black robe on the left was pulled down, revealing a middle-aged man with a sinister face. He squeezed the words out of his mouth. Chase him. This guy is not familiar with the terrain. We'll take care of him when he runs into a dead end. Where's Anna and Gary? Why haven't they caught up yet? Do they need that much time to deal with the high-level apprentice? The man with crimson eyes looked back and said coldly, They've changed their route. They've interrogated that high-level apprentice and sent us the information of the enemy's team. I'm afraid they've already gone to the weakest team in the 7th area. Judging from the voice, the middle-aged man was the leader of the black robes. Damn it, I knew it would be like this. Looks like we need to work harder. If we let this guy get away, I'm afraid we'll end up with nothing today. The man with crimson eyes clenched his teeth and slammed the snake-headed staff on the ground. His body instantly turned into a cloud of black smoke and disappeared into the wall beside him. The leader of the Black Robes also sneered coldly. A black halo flashed on his body, and his running speed suddenly doubled. After a while, an earth-shattering explosion suddenly sounded from the tunnel in the distance. A violent and ferocious shock wave spread wildly along the winding tunnel, destroying everything in its way. All the stalagmites, stalactites, sand, and soil that blocked the way were swept up and thrown outwards. Even the rock walls that were as hard as steel were hit by the arrow-like witchcraft energy. The entire tunnel was shattered into pieces by the violent explosion and collapsed section by section. The life and death battle between the few Quasi-Magus-level apprentices caused devastating damage to this underground tunnel. It also affected the topography of the surrounding 2 to 3 miles to varying degrees. Large-scale collapses, and dislocations of rock strata would block some of the original tunnels, making it difficult to pass through. However, it could also create new paths. Therefore, the path was broken and there was still hope in the midst of despair. Of course, such a huge commotion could not be hidden from all the sorcerer apprentices in this area. Everyone found a stable place to hide themselves, silently guessing the origin of this disturbance. In a dark and quiet cave, a large black figure suddenly emerged from the ground with a soft pop sound. It seemed to have occupied most of the space in the cave. Damn it! Why is there an earthquake here? Did those wizards not choose to avoid the active areas when they were patrolling? Damn it! Mary's sweet and bewitching voice rang out in the darkness. I'm afraid this is not a natural earthquake. Grimm's calm voice followed. His eyes were full of wisdom in the darkness. The source of the vibration is about 5 miles to the southeast of us. It's at most 20 meters deeper than us. If it's an earthquake, the epicenter can't be so close to the surface. So it's man-made. Mary turned around and stared at Grimm. Obviously, she found it hard to believe that Grimm could maintain such a precise sense of direction and a calm mind in the dark underground. Are you trying to say that one of our teams has encountered the enemy? Very likely, Grimm analyzed calmly. First of all, the epicenter is so close to us. It's impossible to say that it has nothing to do with our team. Also, you've experienced the underground creatures here. Apart from a few types, most of them can't pose a threat to senior apprentices, let alone quasi-wizards. So it can't be caused by a team that encountered an undefeatable underground creature. So there's only one possibility left. Yes. Mary nodded in agreement. It should be those bastards. Now we don't know who's so unlucky to have encountered them. I really want to know how strong they are. With your magic puppet that can travel underground, we might have a chance to attack them. We've been too careless this time. After all, it's our first time entering the underground. Before we get familiar with the unique environment and fighting style, we should stick together and complete the mission before thinking about splitting up. Also what? Also, don't forget, we're the weakest among the team. If the enemy really wants to launch a sneak attack, I'm afraid they won't let us go. If they won't let us go, then so be it. I also want to see how strong they are. By the way, since your earth element magic puppet is so amazing, can you sense the movements of the enemies around you? If you can help me catch a bastard, I'll spend a night with you. How about it? After saying that, Mary's finger gently slid across Grimm's lips, and she laughed wildly without restraint. Grimm shuddered. He could not help but feel a headache coming on from Mary's bad taste. Chapter 55. Grimm tried his best to expel Mary's thoughts from his mind and inserted the I chip into the control core of the demon crocodile hunter. Everything around him suddenly became silent. When Grimm's perception extended to the strange world formed by the endless earth elements, he discovered that the slightest tremor on the ground would cause the earth elements to ripple. However, these ripples were extremely weak and only occurred between the earth elements. Therefore, it was very difficult for non-earth element creatures to perceive even the slightest movement in the distance. But Grimm did it. When his perception was immersed in the strange world, he could sense the slightest tremor within 100 meters. Even the sound of snakes and scorpions crawling in their nests could be sensed through the subtle spiritual connection between the earth elements. Then, it would form a spiritual projection in his mind that was no different from reality. Due to the limitations of his spiritual force, his perception could only extend to a distance of 100 meters. Beyond this range, he could only vaguely sense the direction of the tremor, but it was very difficult for him to directly copy the scene near the source of the tremor in his mind. On the ground, this distance of a mere 100 meters was too short. Any apprentice could look into the distance from a high vantage point, and if they could fly into the air, their vision could even reach a range of 100 meters. However, in this underground world that was surrounded by thick rock strata, sand, and soil, a range of 100 meters was already an astoundingly vast area. In the underground world, if two people were separated by a thick rock wall, even if they were only 10 meters apart, it would still be very difficult for them to detect each other's existence. In a strange place like the gloomy cave, the deeper one went, the higher the metal content in the rock layer, and the greater the interference to spiritual perception and detection spells. Therefore, without any special means, there were many examples of people not being able to detect each other with only a thin layer of rock wall between them. After all, soundless sneaking and night vision were basic skills that all intelligent creatures living underground must have. Grim was like a person who was immersed in a dream. He could not help but murmur to himself, describing the situation around him one by one. Suddenly, his body trembled, and a voice as soft as a mosquito reached Mary's ears. 17 degrees southeast, 100 meters away. 2 humanoid creatures. Strong elemental aura detected. Preliminary judgment. Apprentices. Mary's body stiffened, and her scarlet eyes narrowed slightly. The direction of the epicenter was in that direction, and now the 2 sorcerer apprentices who suddenly appeared also came from that direction. Needless to say, the possibility of something bad happening was far greater than something good. Can you identify them? It's best if we can figure out how strong they are. Mary whispered into Grim's ear. Grim was still immersed in his senses, as if he did not hear anything. They're coming towards us, but they're off by 4 degrees. There are 3 tunnels and 2 caves in between. The distance is 93 meters. They have reached the first cave. There is a huge collapse. There's no direct path to us. They seem to be casting some kind of spell. There's a strong elemental reaction. Wait, they seem to have something in their hands that can detect us. That is, Grim suddenly opened his eyes and said in shock, "It's a communication crystal. They have the communication crystals that we distributed before we split up, and are now using the aura from the crystals to locate us." Before entering the dark cave, the members of the team had left their personal imprints on each other to facilitate communication. Now that the other party had obtained a communication crystal that only the members of the team could have, it meant that one of their team members had fallen into their hands. Grim took out a blue crystal the size of a fist from his waist pouch and was about to throw it away. But in the next second, Mary stopped him. If they are really using the aura from the communication crystal to locate us, then we might as well set up a trap for them. Speaking of killing, Mary's eyes were filled with killing intent. Both of them were ruthless people. After a brief discussion, Mary grabbed Grim's communication crystal and disappeared into the darkness. Grim grinned and lightly stepped on the magic crocodile. His whole body slowly sank into the mud under his feet. Anna led the way through the twisted and broken tunnel. Before she entered the next cave, she quickly scanned her surroundings. Her gaze swept through the silent darkness and landed in the distance. At the edge of the twisted tunnel, broken peaks and stalactites were arranged in a crisscross pattern. Some blurry light of unknown origin shone through the shadows, like the sharp fangs of a demon when it grinned. Tilting his head and listening carefully, he could hear a rumbling sound coming from the ground below. Thin mist constantly spewed out from the cracks on the walls, reflecting the faint magical light emitted by the moss and fungi growing on the walls. forming a strange and dazzling illusion. In such an environment, it was extremely difficult to chase after the enemy. The battle that happened in the distance had a serious impact on the terrain here. Many familiar roads had become unrecognizable. This also weakened the terrain advantage of the underground natives. The enemy they were chasing was obviously cunning and could not leave too many traces in the air. So Anna had to cast a spell to check the enemy's position every time they moved forward. Anna placed the blood-stained communication crystal on the ground and softly chanted a strange incantation that others could not decipher. When she finished casting the spell, a pale woman with no facial features and long hair appeared in front of her. "Great ancient vengeful spirit, please show me the enemy's position." Hearing her request, the faceless vengeful spirit focused on the communication crystal. It slowly turned its head and finally fixed its position in a certain direction. "Looks like they're moving towards Area 11. The black-robed quasi-sorcerer Gary, who had been following behind Anna, could not help but say excitedly. Gary's interruption had clearly caused the spirit-summoning ritual to backfire. The faceless, vengeful spirit's head turned back again. Its cold gaze pierced through the long hair and stared at the black-robed quasi-sorcerer Gary. It opened its mouth and was about to let out a soul-sucking scream. As a high-level apprentice, Anna suddenly bit the tip of her tongue and spat out a mouthful of hot blood, hitting the faceless, vengeful spirit's face. With a shrill soul scream, the vengeful spirit disappeared. Anna let out a muffled groan. It was obvious that she had also suffered from a backlash. The black-robed quasi-sorcerer Gary did not feel the slightest regret for his reckless actions. With a wave of his robe, he turned into a whistling gust of wind and disappeared. His rapid words echoed in Anna's ears for a long time before slowly dissipating. "I'm going to chase after the enemy. Hurry up and catch up." When she was the only one left in the field, a trace of hatred and resentment appeared in Anna's ice-cold eyes. However, she also knew that with her status as a high-level apprentice, she could not afford to offend these quasi-sorcerers. If it was not for the fact that they wanted to borrow her spirit-summoning ability, these quasi-sorcerers would not have allowed her to join their hunting team. Their targets were a beginner apprentice and a high-level apprentice. Such a weak team dared to travel underground. Sometimes, Anna couldn't help but wonder if the brains of the Magi on the surface were damaged. To actually send such a weak team to the underground, they were practically sending themselves to their deaths. Anna hurriedly packed up the items in the field and wrapped her black robe tightly around herself. She quickly ran along the pitch-black tunnel. If she was too slow, the quasi-sorcerer Gary would not leave any loot for her. Now, Anna could only hope that the high-level apprentice among the targets could resist a little longer. That way, she would have the chance to capture a beginner apprentice. In the Elysium city of the fallen sorcerers that lacked resources, the resources that a beginner apprentice on the surface could exchange for were enough for Anna to live a leisurely life for half a year. The dark tunnel continued to extend in front of her. The jagged and rugged terrain made it extremely difficult for her to run. Fortunately, the strong wind elemental aura left behind by the quasi-sorcerer Gary had not dissipated in the tunnel, so Anna did not have to waste any effort to identify the path. However, just as she passed through the last tunnel and was about to reach the huge cave in Area 11, Anna suddenly stopped in the middle of the tunnel. For no reason, a terrifying intuition of danger surged in her heart. Rumble! The sudden tremor caused Anna to turn pale with fright. She could clearly sense that the source of the terrifying tremor was actually under her feet. The violent tremor caused the tunnel in front of her to crack. Under the violent dislocation of the rock layers, tons of sand and soil poured down from above, quickly forcing her back into the cave that she had just passed through. And there, in the dark and ice-cold world, there was a strange human figure silently waiting for her. To outsiders, the darkness was the source of terror, but to Anna, who lived underground all year round, it was the best cover and protection. However, at this moment, she still could not hide the shock in her heart. From afar, she sized up this surface sorcerer acolyte who dared to challenge her. It was that high-level acolyte. Based on the strength of the spiritual waves, Anna quickly identified the identity of the other party. Let your companion come out. Anna's intelligent brain quickly analyzed the whole story. I really did not expect that a beginner acolyte could actually have the ability to pass through the soil. Looks like he's the most suitable person here. The micro-earthquake just now happened at the right time, and the strength was just right. It made full use of the terrain here to separate her from the black-robed quasi-sorcerer Gary. It seemed like the other party was planning to devour the weak and take advantage of her, a high-level acolyte. Chapter 56. While she was still charging, Anna had already cast 2 or 3 strange magic halos on Mary. Confusion. Deceleration. One could confuse the target's mind, making it difficult for her to respond in time. The other could slow down the target's body, reducing their speed by half. These 2 simple curse-type spells, if the target had no way to dispel them, their strength would be reduced by more than 30%. But that wasn't the end of it. Following Anna's shout, a strange green rune lit up in the palms of her outstretched palms. Immediately, her hands turned into countless twisted green vines from her elbows, whipping towards Mary, who was standing in place with a whistling wind. Contract Spirit Summon. However, Anna's Contract Spirit Summon was a little special. She could fuse part of her body with the summoned Contract Spirit, thus gaining some unimaginable combat ability. Pa! The powerful green vine whips lashed on the hard stone floor, immediately creating 2 large, spiderweb-like cracks on the ground. In the midst of the flying gravel, Mary's figure turned into a series of afterimages, appearing beside Anna in an instant. Mary's ghost-like speed gave Anna a scare. This was the afterimage that was formed because of the deceleration spell. If not for the deceleration spell, wouldn't she not be able to see the afterimage? Anna could not help but hate her impulsiveness when she thought about how she had to face an opponent with super speed. Damn it, I shouldn't have fought such an opponent in close combat. Anna could not retract her vine whips in time. With a shout, a dazzling green halo quickly spread along her body, quickly condensing into a thorny armor outside her full body. After completing the defense of her body, Anna used all her strength to protect her head with her vine whips, whipping the afterimages that appeared in front of her into pieces. Puff, puff, puff. Although Anna's defense was impenetrable, the thorny armor outside her body continued to ripple. The vine armor on her chest and ribs cracked, and a few crisscrossing scratches appeared on her body. Her left hand that had turned into a vine whip was continuously cut by her opponent's finger blades, and a long section of it was broken. Although green liquid flowed out from the wound, Anna was still in so much pain that she kept groaning and retreating. Under Anna's frenzied urging, a new vine whip sprung out once again, turning into a sky full of whip shadows, madly lashing at every possible enemy that appeared in her sight. She had no idea where the enemy's main body was. All she could capture was the strange afterimage left behind by the other party as he rapidly weaved through the air. Obviously, this Anna was not proficient in close combat. She only relied on the summoned spirit to possess a certain level of close combat ability. But when her weak fighting ability met a red shirt Mary who could fight in close combat, she was destined to be in for a tragedy. Although her crazily brandishing vine whips couldn't catch Mary's body, and her close-fitting vine armor couldn't completely block Mary's fingerblade attacks, it still played a big role. At the very least, under her frenzied attacks, Mary was unable to recklessly attack her body's external defenses. Although it would cause some damage to her from time to time, it was difficult for it to reach the level of a fatal blow. Behind them, at the end of the tunnel that was blocked by countless mud and gravel, a series of earth-shattering explosions suddenly rang out. Evidently, the black-robed quasi-sorcerer who had been lured to the other side of the tunnel had noticed something was wrong behind him and was madly attacking the tunnel with some sort of method. The violent witchcraft attack shook the entire tunnel, causing the entire tunnel to rumble. Large amounts of sand, stones, and mud fell down from the top of the tunnel. Countless rock peaks and stalactites were suddenly broken, falling down in all directions, drowning the entire battlefield in a cloud of suffocating stone dust. If the black-robed quasi-sorcerer was given enough time, he might really be able to blast open the rock wall and create a temporary tunnel. Precisely because she expected that reinforcements would soon arrive, Anna only defended and did not attack. No matter how much Mary scratched her body, she continued to attack without a care in the world. None of these high-level apprentices were easy to deal with. Although their witchcraft had not reached the level where they could be used extravagantly, they had covered all aspects of attack, defense, harassment, and self-enhancement. This made it difficult for outsiders to detect their weaknesses and quickly defeat them. From the battle situation between Anna and Mary, it was obvious that Anna's battle prowess was weaker than the swift and ferocious Mary's. However, it was not easy for Mary to end the battle quickly. At the very least, she would not be able to do so without paying a certain price. Seeing the countless cracks on the rock wall behind her, which seemed to be on the verge of collapse, red-robed Mary finally gave up on the idea of killing Anna by herself. "Bastard, don't just hide to the side and watch. Come and help." Mary dodged the vine whips coming from her left and right. She waved her hands continuously, leaving 2 deep wounds on Anna's body. However, she did not have the time to continue attacking and could only quickly dodge the vine whips that came back at her. When she broke through Anna's defenses again and approached her body, the 2 wounds had already been covered by the thorny vines. After this happened again and again, Mary finally could not take it anymore and cried out. Anna's face turned pale. One red-robed, Mary was already so difficult to deal with. If another helper came, she would probably be doomed. Thinking of this, Anna did not dare to be careless. She bit off half of her tongue and spat out copious amounts of blood. Her entire body suddenly grew taller. If Anna's hands had only transformed into green vine whips before, then at this moment, her entire body began to swell. Most of her skin was torn apart, revealing countless green vines that were randomly digging around. After forcefully raising the level of the contract spirit, Anna's entire body had turned into a terrifying man-eating flower. Beneath her feet were forked green roots, her hands were green vine whips, and her body was a stem covered in thorns. Her head, on the other hand, did not change and was wrapped in countless large petals. There were no longer any traces of a human on her body. After becoming a violent carnivorous plant, the whipper, all the vital organs that Anna had as a human had disappeared. As long as she could hold on in time until Gary arrived, the second transformation of the contract spirit would be worth it. Grim, who had been watching the battle from the shadows, did not dare to be careless. He finally decided to intervene in the battle between the 2 high-level lurlings. With a slight tremor, the sturdy stone slabs under Anna's feet suddenly turned into a muddy and slippery swamp trap. Before Anna could scream and escape from the area, a terrifying giant figure appeared beside her and bit down on her thick and tough waist. Anna let out an ear-piercing shriek in pain. She waved her 2 thick and long vine whips in the air, whipping the earth armor on the demon crocodile's body into pieces. The head that was hidden in the layers of petals opened its mouth and spat out a ball of sticky and smelly green acid. The acid splashed onto the aborigine hunter on the back of the demon crocodile, instantly corroding its upper limbs and head. If not for the aborigine hunter's control crystal in its chest, it would have been completely destroyed by that attack. Grim hid in the shadows far away and could not help but feel a lingering fear. A battle between high-level lurlings was not something a junior lurling like him could easily participate in. If he had not been smart enough to control the demon crocodile hunter to attack, he would have been killed as well. If he had been on the back of the demon crocodile just now, that attack would have probably killed him as well. He had not learned any defensive spells yet, so he did not have any way to escape from the vengeful attack of a high-level lurling. However, Grimm's demon crocodile hunter only needed to restrain Anna's attack for a moment, and it was enough to turn the situation around. Before Anna could save herself from the demon crocodile's mouth, Mary's attack was already upon her. Asterisk TSS, TSS, TSS. Asterisk a series of sounds of flesh being pierced could be heard. Mary's entire body was crouched near Anna's open petal head. She used her finger blades to cut open the tough skin and pierced her long fangs into the flesh where the head and stem met. The rapid sucking caused Anna to go berserk. She waved her arms continuously, whipping Mary's back into a bloody mess. However, she could not stop a vampire from crazily sucking. As a large amount of essence blood was lost, the strength of Anna's whipping became weaker. Finally, her arms drooped down powerlessly, and all the stems and flowers on her body began to rapidly wither. Her head, which was hidden among the petals, also closed her eyes sadly. As her life rapidly faded, Anna could no longer maintain her transformation. Her body continuously withered and changed shape, returning to her human form. However, the moment her life completely withered, the demon crocodile hunter opened its mouth under Grimm's command and swallowed Anna's corpse and Mary into its stomach. It then turned around and quickly sank into the ground with Grimm. As soon as they disappeared, a deafening explosion sounded from the cliff in the distance. A large hole was blasted open, and a black-robed quasi-sorcerer wrapped in a green glowing hurricane rushed out. The black-robed quasi-sorcerer Gary could not help but roar angrily as he looked at the mess on the ground and smelled the fishy green liquid that had splattered all over the battlefield. He did not feel any pain for Anna's death. He was just angry that the enemy had used such a simple strategy to lure the tiger away from the mountain and kill his comrade right in front of his eyes. This was the greatest insult to him. You bastards, come out and fight me if you have the guts. Damn it, I've already memorized your aura. Don't let me see you again. Chapter 57. Grimm was forced to float to the surface after walking for a couple of 100 meters in the dark mud. After all, the underground world was not as easy to travel as it was on the surface. Large areas of rock and sand made it extremely difficult for the crocodiles to travel. Once they were out of the danger zone, Grimm ordered the crocodile hunter to crawl out of a tunnel. Closing his eyes, Grimm sensed that Mary, who was hiding in the crocodile's stomach, was breathing rapidly. Her body was boiling hot. Grimm could not help but shake his head and sigh. Ancient blood-sucking mutants were indeed powerful. They could continuously improve themselves by sucking blood. During the battle, Mary had sucked all the blood essence of the enemy's high-level acolyte. This allowed her to quickly replenish her blood energy reserves, and she began to transform her body again. Due to the lack of necessary information, Grimm did not dare to disturb her natural evolution. He could only choose a relatively safe area and let the crocodile spit her out. She laid her flat on a piece of carpet. Grimm excitedly began to loot Anna's body. Grimm put his palms together and closed his eyes, praying to all the gods he could think of. Then he rubbed his hands excitedly and laid down on Anna's miserable body, touching it left and right. As a high-level acolyte, it was impossible for her to not have any magic items or artifacts. No matter how poor she was, she would at least have magic books and notes. Even if she did not have these, magic crystals and magic materials would do. Anna was not ugly when she was alive, and her body was voluptuous. Unfortunately, the battle at the end was too fierce, and most of her skin had been torn into countless bloody wounds. However, most of the clothes and equipment on her body were left behind. The first thing Grimm plucked off was a bracelet on her right wrist. Under the elemental sight scan, the bracelet constantly emitted a dark green glow. It was obviously a special magic item. Grimm held it for a long time and finally determined that it was a magic bracelet that could quickly activate the plant thorn armor. Although plant element and Grimm's talent did not match, as long as the energy in the bracelet was not exhausted, Grimm could forcibly use it. Therefore, Grimm, who did not have any defensive spells, was overjoyed. He hugged the bracelet and kissed it, then put it on his wrist without saying anything. The next thing to be pulled off was Anna's boots. According to Grimm's appraisal, it was a pair of magic leather boots made of lantern grass and flower demon skin. which could activate the effect of forest walk. Wearing these leather boots, the situation of being blocked by bushes, vines, and thorns in the primeval forest would no longer appear. Even in a dense forest that was impassable, wearing this pair of leather boots would allow one to pass through it like walking on flat ground. What a pity. What a pity that it's a woman's style. Grimm gestured a few times, but he was obviously not suitable. He could only put it aside and see if Mary would be interested in it in the future. The third item found was a magic earring. It was also a plant healing spell. Wearing this earring, one could find a place with lush vegetation and stand still. It could recover about 10 points of life energy in 15 minutes. Although the conditions were a little harsh, it could be quite effective at special times. After all, the hemostatic cream could only heal wounds, but it was difficult to recover lost life energy. Thus, if he wore this earring on his body, it might be able to save his life at a critical moment. With Anna's status as a high-ranked acolyte, having 3 pieces of magic equipment was already not bad. Hence, Grimm quickly took off her belt and held it in his hands to appraise it. It was an exquisite and gorgeous belt, with a series of strange runes engraved on the inside. Grimm only managed to identify 4 runes after a long time, and there were a total of 11 runes. Left with no choice, Grimm could only borrow the AI chip's power. AI chip, scan these runes. Beep. Scanning of storage belt completed. 11 ancient Magus runes discovered, determined to be the activation incantation for the storage belt. Contents of the incantation are: following the AI chip's data, Grimm furrowed his brows and began to recite the 11 runes according to the pronunciation of the ancient magi. Just as the incantation was completed, Grimm's mind moved, and he suddenly felt the existence of a small space on the belt. Within the space, there were a dozen items that he could not identify. A storage belt. It really was a storage belt. Grimm had been drooling over such a treasure for a long time. Although acolytes like him were most used to having a storage pouch, it was not a spatial item after all. Hence, it could not reduce the weight of items, nor could it isolate the special energy waves of magic items. On the other hand, a storage belt was the lowest grade of spatial items. Items placed in it would no longer be a burden to Grimm, and it would also be impossible for others to sense the magical energy waves within it. Hence, he was overjoyed to be able to obtain a storage belt in the first battle in the underground world. Grimm carefully glanced back. Seeing that Mary was still unconscious in a deep meditative state, he immediately put on the storage belt. Of course, he still covered his waist pouch and concealed the storage belt. Wealth must not be revealed. Even those quasi-magi might not be able to get their hands on such a good item, so he decided to enjoy it first. After looking around a few more times, Grimm made sure that this senior acolyte from the Fallen Sorcerer's camp did not have any magic items on her. Then he focused his mind on the storage belt and searched through the items inside. 7 magic crystals, a sorcery notebook, a crying frog used for special spells, a contact crystal, an emerald green wooden stick the length of an arm, a magic mithril the size of a thumb, and a wooden statue used by a priest. Together with the spoils from today, Grimm had 10 magic crystals in total. He could be considered to be quite wealthy. The sorcery notebook contained Anna's experiences in learning plant-type spells. It also contained the knowledge of summoning spirits. These were all things that Grimm could not master. It seemed that he could only think of a way to exchange them after he returned. The crying frog was a very common spell material, mainly used to set up support spell formations, such as alarm spell formations. The contact crystal was obviously an item that Anna had seized from a member of her team. Through sensing the personal imprint inside, Grimm could determine that the person who had met with misfortune was the senior acolyte, called Matthew. The emerald green wooden stick and magic mithril were relatively rare spell materials. The former was obviously a semi-finished product, which seemed to be a plant-type magic tool that Anna had made. The latter was a high-grade material used to make wands. It could greatly increase the energy conductivity of a wand and reduce the loss of energy. With this amount of mithril, Grimm would be able to make himself a small one-handed wand with more than enough to spare. As for the last wooden statue, it was a little hard to figure out. Grimm could clearly feel the presence of energy on it, but he could not find any runes or magic words. It seemed that if he wanted to find out its specific use, he would have to wait until he returned to the Magus Tower and find a professional appraiser. While Grimm was holding the wooden statue in his hand, a soft and warm body suddenly pressed against his back. "Hee, little handsome boy, you're so nice to me. How do you want me to repay you?" A soft and seductive voice sounded in Grimm's ears. Then, Mary's hands went under his armpits and slowly rubbed against his chest. Ugh. This sudden alluring action caused Grimm's hair to stand on end, and his body instantly tensed up like a wooden statue. "Do you want me to give you a kiss?" Mary's sweet voice lingered in his ears. Just as Grimm was about to explain, a fragrant tongue slipped into his mouth. In an instant, it was as if a ball of lava had exploded in his mind. Grimm's mind trembled as he flew into the sky, and for a moment, he did not know where his body was. Only after a long time did Grimm break free from his trance. At this moment, Mary was already sitting beside him, holding the pair of enchanted leather boots in her hands and inspecting them. Chip, what happened to me? Why was Mary able to have such a huge effect on me?" Grimm secretly asked. Beep. Detected remnants of a mental spell. The main body might have been bewitched by a mental spell. From the effects of a spell, it should be the natural charm of a mental spell. Natural charm? Grimm's mouth twitched uncontrollably. Damn it, this was an extremely domineering mental wizard spell. It had to be known that most mental wizard spells would have obvious mental ripples when they were cast. As long as one paid attention to this, it would be easy to defend against mental spell attacks. However, the domineering nature of a natural charm lay in the word natural. This sort of natural charm could not be learned and would only be awakened in a limited number of special races. Once it was awakened, it would bring huge benefits to the person. Any creature with a natural charm would not be attacked by neutral creatures when they entered dangerous areas, as long as they did not do anything harmful. Moreover, they could easily gain the trust and affection of other creatures. If Mary really had a natural charm, then her every word and action would be even more enchanting and bewitching than before. It would also be harder to defend against her bewitchment. Grimm could not help but suspect that this dead Anna had a special bloodline like a flower demon or a tree demon. Otherwise, how could she have passed on such a strange bloodline to Mary? "You're awake, little brother?" Mary was obviously pleased with herself. "I didn't expect a kiss to bewitch you to this extent. Your spiritual will really needs to be tempered." Grimm looked at Mary in distress. He could feel that Mary was still unable to control her new ability, so her every word and action had a strong sense of temptation. "We've already killed a fallen acolyte. Do you think we should continue to plunder resources here or hurry back?" Grimm could only divert Mary's attention as much as he could. "Let's go back." Although Mary was a little too excited, she did not let it get to her head. With such a big commotion here, the other teams will probably hurry back as soon as possible. "Let's go back too. I don't want to be trapped underground by those black-robed, prospective magi." "All right." Chapter 58. When Grimm and Isaac returned to the place where the team had split up, for people were already waiting there. Marcus, Leander, Isaac, and Bruce revealed relaxed smiles at the same time when they saw the weakest team emerge safely. If something went wrong with Grimm and Mary's team, then someone would have to carry out the mission alone in the next underground patrol. However, before they could retract the smile on their faces, they were shocked by the corpse that Mary brought back. The black wizard robe, which was completely different from theirs, all showed that this was a wizard apprentice from the fallen wizard camp. The 3 senior wizard apprentices were fine, but the prospective wizard Marcus looked a little unnatural. "Is it a senior wizard apprentice or a prospective wizard?" Marcus asked in a deep voice. "Of course it's a senior wizard apprentice. If it's a prospective wizard, I'm afraid we won't be able to come back," Mary said matter-of-factly. After hearing her answer, the shock on the quasi-wizard Marcus' face eased a little, but the bewilderment on his face was still there. If he had not experienced the underground trip, he might not have cared about this result. But the trip just now had brutally told him that it was a disaster to use elemental witchcraft. Elemental witchcraft had always been at the forefront of all witchcraft because of its great power and wide range. This allowed apprentices who had mastered elemental witchcraft to temporarily transform into a terrifying cannon, submerging the battlefield in a violent and ferocious wave of witchcraft. It was not the number of enemies that limited an apprentice's ability, but the limited amount of witchcraft they had. But in the underground, these past experiences were no longer useful. In a section of the underground passageway, they had to fight against an unexpected enemy. Overly fierce elemental sorcery would directly destroy the only space they could stay in. What awaited them would be tons of earth and gravel sloping downwards. Even if it was a prospective wizard, once buried underground, the chance of escaping alive was not high. In the underground world, the pursuit of a battle between apprentices was not the terrifying power of witchcraft, but the right amount of witchcraft. Only by restraining the power of witchcraft and accurately and effectively projecting it to the enemy could one be considered a qualified witchcraft user. When faced with the rat men that swarmed over in the dark, perhaps it was not the enemy that brought disaster to you, but the exploding fireball that you casually shot out. Therefore, after experiencing the besiegement of hordes of underground creatures, after experiencing the sneak attacks of strange magical beasts in the dark, every acolyte who had just entered the underground would slowly shed away their past arrogant and domineering personalities in this painful and difficult tempering. They would begin to become ruthless and steady, intelligent and quick-witted. It was precisely because they had personally experienced this that they knew how painful and depressing it was to fight against an enemy of the same level underground. Hence, when they saw Mary bring back the corpse of a high-ranked acolyte of the same level as her, they could not help but reveal looks of shock. None of the acolytes who accepted the mission to investigate the gloomy crypt had taken the path of a physique refinement magus. Why? This was because the underground world's narrow and deep passageways and battleground were not suitable for them, who liked to fight head-on. Battles here were actually more inclined towards small-scale spells that were of moderate power and could be cast faster. Both sides needed to constantly change the battleground, using the accumulation of partial victories to swallow the opponent bit by bit. However, once one side saw that the situation was not good and decided to escape, it would be difficult for the other side to trap and kill the other side without special means. The fact that Red Dress Mary could do this obviously showed that she had some kind of strange witchcraft that was extremely suitable for use in the underground. So what could it be? Everyone could not help but fall into deep thought. At this time, 34 hours had passed since the last time they parted. According to the inference of the journey, even the most difficult Sabrina and the others should have returned by now. Thinking of the fierce earthquake that had occurred previously, everyone could not help but feel worried. Fortunately, the most terrible thing did not happen. After waiting for 3 hours, Sabrina and Sheila came back dejectedly. The mission site they chose was located nearly 10 miles deep underground, so the huge change in the ground just now had the greatest impact on them. If Sabrina's major was not mechanical witchcraft, and several of her main organs had been replaced by powerful magic machinery, it would have been difficult to open up a path from the layers of collapsed underground to the surface. Since 4 out of 5 teams had returned, it was obvious who had been attacked. Just when everyone was bitterly preparing to accept the bitter result of losing 2 members in the first underground patrol, the young prospective wizard Leo unexpectedly ran back to the camp covered in blood. His gray apprentice robe was already torn, and his thin body was full of crisscross scars. And all the scars were entangled with black smoke that could not be dispersed, corroding the rolled-up wounds until the flesh was black. Leo's face was also attacked by the acid arrow, and half of his face was corroded by the strong acid. If it was not for the clear mental wave that revealed his identity, the team members could not help but treat him as an enemy. Despite such a serious injury, Leo still refused to be treated by his teammates. Before establishing true trust, He did not want the secrets in his body to fall into the hands of outsiders. Alone in a corner, Leo hurriedly treated his injuries, and only then did he accept the questioning of everyone with a gloomy face. When she heard that the people who attacked him and Matthew were actually 3 black-robed prospective wizards and a senior apprentice, Sabrina could not help but ponder. With such strength, even if she encountered them, it would be hard for her to win. The fact that Leo was able to save his life showed how powerful his witchcraft was. After questioning Leo, Sabrina could not help but ask Mary, "How powerful were the enemies you encountered?" 2 enemies, a prospective wizard and a senior apprentice. We planned to lure the prospective wizard away and then ambush the senior apprentice. Grimm and I worked together to kill her. Mary briefly recounted the events that had transpired. Although she described the enemies that she and Grimm worked together to kill, out of habit, everyone still intentionally or unintentionally ignored Grimm's existence. It could not be helped. A beginner apprentice's spiritual power did not exceed 10 points, and he could only master 1 or 2 witchcraft. How could such a person participate in a battle between senior apprentices? Sorry, everyone really could not imagine. Only then did Leo notice the female corpse lying under Mary's feet, and could not help but scream loudly. That's her, that's her. She was one of the 4 people that attacked me. After that, when Matthew and I split up to escape, 2 of the prospective wizards were chasing after me. The other prospective wizard and this woman went after Matthew. I only managed to escape after a bitter battle. Leo's words were a little vague, but everyone did not care. What split up to escape? At that dangerous time, how would Matthew, as a senior apprentice, have the guts to escape alone? This Leo must have seen that the situation was not good, so he abandoned Matthew and chose to escape alone. This could also divert a lot of the enemy's firepower and attention. Although everyone had guessed what might have happened, no one blamed Leo for it. If he put himself in his shoes, he would probably make the same choice as him. Matthew could only blame himself for not being able to escape. He did not have any life-saving methods, yet he dared to come to the underground to carry out a red-level mission. After summarizing the information from both sides, Sabrina could be considered to have preliminary basic information about the enemy. 3 prospective wizards, 1 walked the path of a blood wizard, had the terrifying bloodline of a mutated magic snake. 1 walked the path of an arcane wizard, could summon some powerful corpse puppets. 1 walked the path of a law-defying wizard, and his elemental affinity was wind particles. After the team returned to the wizard tower with this information and the corpse of a senior apprentice enemy, they successfully received the relevant rewards from Wizard Angus. After all, Leo was attacked on the way back after completing the mission, so he still received his own mission reward. As for Mary, as the lucky one who killed an enemy of the same rank by herself, she received a special reward from Wizard Angus. It was just that the process of receiving the reward was kept secret, so no one knew exactly what reward she received. When everyone was about to leave, Wizard Angus warned them in a gloomy tone, "Little guys, don't think that you could be considered a veteran just because you successfully returned from the underground once. In the future missions, there will be more and more situations like this, and the attacks will become more frequent. Only those who are fully prepared can live longer. So make full use of these few days of rest, or else you won't be so lucky the next time you go underground. Also, the information you brought back is very good. I'll pass the information to the hunting team here. I'm sure those guys who ambushed you didn't have too much trouble on their way back." He. Through the content that was vaguely revealed in Wizard Angus's words, the members of the team finally understood the purpose of the existence of the other teams of apprentices made up of pure veterans. If their new team was the bait, then Kevin the Blackhand's team was the hunting fork that hunted their prey. One was the prey, luring the strong apprentices of the opposing camp to show themselves, while the other was the predator, specifically hunting these black-robed prospective wizards who exposed their tracks. It could be imagined that the black-robed prospective wizards who ambushed Leo, Mary, and the others did not leave them behind, which was equivalent to exposing their tracks. A message was passed, and naturally, there would be hunting teams that patrolled the underground all year round. Chapter 59. The reward for the mission was directly linked to the difficulty of the mission. Mary and Grimm had completed the mission together with the lowest difficulty, so the reward they received was much less than the others. However, they had the head of an enemy, so the special reward they received still made them smile. After returning to their respective residences, Grimm was about to return to his room to rest when Mary called out to him and threw something at him. It was an earth element crystal the size of an egg. The yellowish-brown crystal was surrounded by an earthy yellow halo. Tiny and short-lived fluorescence was constantly emitting from the crystal core. Holding it in his hand, it was as beautiful as a dazzling star. Grimm could not help but hold his breath. Through the fluctuating elemental rhythm, he could clearly tell that this was an earth element crystal that had reached the level of a quasi-wizard. You deserve it. I've sucked the enemy's blood dry, so take this as your reward for your hard work. Mary was as carefree as ever. She turned around and returned to her residence. Grimm hesitated for a long time with an expression of surprise. Finally, he put away the gift and entered his room. After confirming that everything was safe, Grimm examined himself and silently communicated with the AI chip. AI, chip, can you analyze Mary's body data? Beep. Data collection completed. Detailed data as follows. Mary, ancient vampire, high-ranked acolyte. Strength, 9. Agility, 17. Vitality, 13. Spirit, 18. Innate abilities, blood-sucking regeneration, bat, demon transformation, natural charm, forming. Ugh. It was indeed a powerful race's innate ability that could evolve by sucking blood. She really didn't know what kind of witchcraft experiments that Wizard Anderson, who had been staying in the Swamp Tower all his adult life, had done on her to create such a terrifying witchcraft puppet. If Grimm's guess was right, Wizard Anderson must have left some kind of control method on Mary's body, and this method was directly rooted in Mary's vampire bloodline. Although Anderson was more indulgent with Mary now, he never interfered with her. However, once Mary grew to the level that he hoped for, it would be time for him to harvest her. What was the limit of Mary's growth? A quasi-wizard or an official magus? Could it be that Anderson was planning to use this method to harvest a wizard-level voodoo puppet? After all, Mary only needed to advance to become a quasi-sorcerer to gain the ability to create blood thralls. At that time, as long as Anderson needed it, Mary alone would be able to gather a loyal army of blood thralls for him. For a rank 1 magus, this was a pretty good method to deal with enemies. Mary was well aware of her own situation, so her every move was filled with a sense of indulgence. He did whatever he wanted, and he was not willing to suppress his true nature at all. Maybe even she couldn't tell which was her own heart and which was the will that Wizard Anderson had planted in her soul through witchcraft. Therefore, even though Grimm and Mary had been getting along well recently, he still had a trace of vigilance in his heart because he did not know when the fuse in Mary's body would detonate. But these are things that can be solved over time. No problem. After all, as long as Grimm successfully became an official wizard, Wizard Anderson would no longer be an unreachable figure. Perhaps Mary's problem could be solved through an exchange of interests or other means. Grimm sat in front of the wooden table in his temporary residence and organized all the spoils of war he had obtained from this underground trip. Of course, he would keep the thorn armor bracelet and the storage belt from Anna for his own use, but he could sell the earrings that could absorb the essence of plants to exchange for more suitable magic equipment. That magic notebook had lost its value after scanning it, so he could sell it to see if anyone would be interested. That emerald green stick and magic mithril seemed to be the materials that Anna had prepared for her future magic wand. Unfortunately, the materials were not ready yet, so she could only secretly carry them with her. Who would have thought that they would end up in Grimm's hands? The emerald green stick was identified by Wizard Angus as a branch taken from a wizard-level tree spirit, which had a lot of amplification for plant spells. Magic mithril was a product of the underground world, and it was very difficult to get in the outside world. The piece that Grimm had obtained was about the size of his thumb, and it could easily be sold for thousands of magic crystals. Also, it was easy to sell it, but it would be very difficult to buy it again at the same price. After all, magic mithril was a high-end consumable. Those who spent a lot of effort to obtain it would quickly use it up. Therefore, it was usually in a situation where there was a price, but no supply. Therefore, if Grimm wanted to make his first magic wand, he would not need to prepare magic mithril, but he would need to replace the materials used to make the wand. After all, Grimm's elemental affinity was fire, not plant. As for the last wooden statue, Wizard Angus had identified it as a spiritual beacon that could communicate with creatures from another world. According to Wizard Angus, the fallen acolyte they had killed could establish a stable connection with a powerful creature from another world through a summoning ritual. Both parties would exchange items they needed from time to time. However, Wizard Angus was very disdainful about this. The wizard world was a large plain that attracted the attention of the world. It had conquered thousands of small plains, and almost all kinds of resources could be obtained through the internal trading system. There was no need for such a primitive summoning method. Since the laws of each plane were different, coupled with the interference of the energy tide in the sea of stars, a successful long-distance material exchange would usually cost 3 to 5 times more than a normal exchange. Therefore, if it was not for the fact that resources were extremely scarce, no one would use such a primitive method of exchange. The reason why the female acolyte kept this communication beacon was most likely to exchange knowledge with the creatures from another world. This was strictly forbidden by the wizard's system. More importantly, if a native wizard of the wizard world did something like this that betrayed the will of the wizard world, it would reduce or weaken the feedback he would receive from the will of the wizard world. Also, advancing in the wizard world would be much more difficult than normal people. Therefore, there were very few orthodox wizards who would do something that did not make up for the loss. Perhaps only the fallen sorcerers, who were excluded from the sorcerer system, would do such a thing to quench their thirst with poison. As a beginner acolyte, Grimm had never clearly seen the so-called will of the world. Therefore, he was very curious about the will of the world that Wizard Angus respected. Although he did not have a specific plan for his experiments, he still chose to keep this wooden statue. Maybe when his strength increased a little more, he would be able to control his own life, and he would be able to exchange some interesting information with these powerful beings from another world. As for this earth element crystal core that he had accidentally obtained, Grimm did not dare to deal with it. Instead, he ordered the AI chip to scan it and carry out a custom-made magic puppet modification plan. After all this was done, Grimm took out a magic book and began his daily study. He also cooperated with the AI chip to complete some simulations of the spiritual world. When his spiritual force was almost depleted, he lay on his bed and began his daily deep meditation. With the help of the AI chip, he could enter deep meditation every time. Every time he meditated, he would gain about 0.08 points of spiritual force and 4 points of profession experience. This kind of increase was the most important way for a wizard to increase the upper limit of their spiritual force. Although many wizards would choose to continuously use magic potions or strange items to increase their spiritual force, it was not something that a normal acolyte without the support of a family could afford. For example, the most effective magic potion to increase spiritual force was the concentration potion, which was sold for 5 contribution points and 5 magic crystals in the potion hall of the wizard tower. A bottle of concentration potion could increase the spiritual force of a low-level acolyte by 0.5 to 0.7 points. This number did not sound high, but for an ordinary sorcerer apprentice, it was already a rare treasure. Before Grimm had the help of the AI chip, he would not be able to enter deep meditation even once out of 10 times. On the other hand, a light meditation could only increase Grimm's spiritual force by 0 points, which is a world of difference compared to deep meditation. Therefore, a bottle of concentration potion could help an acolyte save at least 2 months of hard meditation. With such a comparison, even though the price of the concentration potion was higher, it was still sought after by many acolytes. A lot of magic resources here required contribution points, which was completely different from the knowledge points Grimm had obtained in the Swamp Tower. The knowledge points were the value system implemented by Wizard Anderson in the Swamp Tower. They could not be used in the outside world. Contribution points were the value system implemented by the Wizard Association in the Wizard Continent. They could be used in any Wizard Association station. As for the other 3 wizard organizations, they each had their own value system. There was a clear gap between them, and they were not compatible. Grimm had worked hard to complete an underground patrol mission. Other than resources, he had also obtained 5 contribution points, which was enough for him to buy a bottle of concentration potion. Chapter 60. The Wizard Tower stationed by the Scattered Tower Forest Sorcerer Association in the Gloomy Crypt could only be considered a small wizard tower. It had 7 floors above ground and 2 underground floors, making it a total of 9 floors. The layout of the Wizard Tower was similar to the Swamp Tower where Grimm had stayed, with only minor differences. The first 3 floors on the ground were public areas for acolytes as their main activity areas. The open public facilities covered almost all areas that acolytes could do. The 4th to 7th floors were the residences and experimental areas of official sorcerers. Without special permission, acolytes would be attacked mercilessly by the tower's defense mechanism. At this moment, Grimm was quietly strolling in the public hall on the 1st floor of the Wizard Tower. Different from the Swamp Tower, the Gloomy Crypt here was an open territory, allowing acolytes to organize their own teams to search for materials and gather resources in various areas. Therefore, the resources here were many times more abundant than the Swamp Tower. Apart from the eerie and terrifying underground world of the Gloomy Crypt, there was also the resource-rich Creelum Mountains on the surface. In the rugged mountains and ravines, there were also countless strange flowers and strange plants, as well as countless powerful magic creatures. Seriously speaking, the area around the Gloomy Crypt was a very suitable place for acolytes to grow. Beginner acolytes could form teams and go to the forests near the Wizard Tower to gather resources, using ordinary forest beasts to practice their spells. Intermediate acolytes could go further and go to the depths of the mountains to train themselves. Advanced acolytes could already try to go to the shallow surface of the Gloomy Crypt, where they could fight with ratmen, clawed terror, undead creatures, and other dark creatures. Acolytes trained step by step in this way were much fiercer and stronger than the acolytes trained in the Swamp Tower through the passage of time and slow meditation. In comparison, Grimm was like an acolyte from a third-rate sorcerer academy, while the other acolytes were fierce combat acolytes who fought with swords and spears. The two could not be compared at all. Early in the morning, the public hall was already crowded with acolytes looking to form teams. Most of them were beginner and intermediate acolytes, but there were also 1 or 2 advanced acolytes. Most acolytes laid a piece of black cloth in the corner of the hall, placed a dozen strange objects on it, and sat down with a book in their hands. Only when acolytes came up to ask would they lazily say a few words, and the rest of the time, they would silently read. This kind of acolyte life was completely different from the Swamp Tower, which made Grimm envious, but he could not do anything about it. After all, before entering the Swamp Tower, all acolytes had signed a contract with Wizard Anderson. They would be a lifetime acolyte of the Swamp Tower. There were only 2 ways to achieve freedom. Either you get Wizard Anderson's permission, or you become an official wizard. If a contract apprentice left the Wizard Tower he belonged to, he would lose his status as a wizard apprentice and become a traitor that anyone could hunt down. A large portion of the fallen sorcerers in the depths of the Dark Crypt had evolved from betrayers. Therefore, even if he was envious of the lifestyle here, Grimm could only shake his head and sigh. Mixed in with the crowd of acolytes, Grimm looked at the acolytes of the Dark Crypt Tower while browsing the stalls on the side of the road. Grimm realized that the acolytes who were shouting in the middle of the hall, even if they were just beginner acolytes, had a full set of decent magic equipment and magic items. Instant magic wands, magic scrolls, and magic potions in their pockets, and accessories. Every one of them was a small arsenal. although their combat ability was not strong. With so many auxiliary items, they could drown their enemies with a large number of spells in a very short period of time. In Grimm's eyes, they were all walking gold coins. From head to toe, from inside to outside, every inch of their bodies exuded a rich smell of money. Looking at them and then at himself, Grimm could not help but feel ashamed. Even the pride he had after winning a small battle was gone. The only ones who could compete with Grimm in poverty were the beginner acolytes who were reading books and setting up stalls. One look in Grimm could tell that they had just become beginner acolytes and did not have the qualifications to roam the forest. Grimm walked around the public hall and basically memorized all the information he needed to know. Then, he chose a stall owner who was more lively to talk to. This was a slightly chubby young man, and the short robes issued by the Magus Tower did not fit him well, making his appearance look a little funny. Coupled with his facial features that kept dancing when he spoke, his stall became the most lively area in the hall. "Hello, I'm Grimm." Grimm introduced himself. "Hello, I'm Sam," the chubby young man said in a humorous tone. "How can I help you?" "Hello, Sam. May I ask if there are any special procedures to set up a stall here?" Sam looked Grimm up and down and asked in confusion. "Are you a beginner apprentice who just arrived?" "Yes, I'm a beginner acolyte who came here 2 days ago," Grimm said vaguely. He did not waste any more time explaining why a beginner acolyte had come here to carry out a deadly mission in the dark crypt. What a pitiful person. I can tell you're a newbie abandoned by your mentor. But don't worry, if you follow your big brother Sam, sooner or later you'll be like them and have a full set of magic equipment. This Sam was unexpectedly a warm-hearted person, instantly turning on his hot-blooded big brother mode. However, Grimm looked at him and then at the data that was projected in his mind and was speechless. This self-proclaimed big brother Sam turned out to be a super pure beginner acolyte with 6 points of spiritual force. This made Grimm a little confused. Sam, I wanted to ask, can I also set up a stall here to sell a few things?" No problem. Sam, have always been the best at taking care of newbies. Come. I have some space here. You can set it up here." With Sam's approval, Grimm quickly unfurled a black cloth the size of a tray and took out 5 items from his waist pouch and placed them on the cloth. The earring that relied on plants to heal itself, the emerald green wooden stick that could be used as the body of a magic staff, the leather boots that could allow one to walk freely in the forest, the chirping frog, and the witchcraft notebook that he had obtained from the enemy. The reason why the leather boots were here was definitely enough to make Grimm lose his breath. Mary actually thought that the magic patterns on the boots were not exquisite enough, so she threw them to Grimm early in the morning and let him deal with them. Grimm could not understand this reason. Thus, he classified Mary as one of the most mysterious creatures in the world. Seeing Grimm set up his stall in such a serious manner, Sam, who was sitting next to him, could not help but laugh. He patted Grimm's shoulder and enthusiastically introduced, "Brother, don't blame me for not warning you. It's very difficult for you to sell things like this. Look at me, my stall is so big and your stall is so small. How are you going to attract their attention? Look at my stall again. Ling Lang's eyes are filled with things but yours. And what's this?" No matter how weak Sam's spiritual force was, he could quickly sense the clear magic waves from the items that Grimm had set up. My goodness, there were a total of 5 items on display, 4 of which were obviously magic items. Also, looking at the magic runes etched on them, they were obviously the style of the underground world. Sam doubtfully picked up the pair of magic earrings and carefully examined them. Suddenly, he exclaimed, "Recovery earrings. These are recovery earrings." His voice was not loud, but it quickly alerted the surrounding apprentices. They all stopped and turned to look at the pair of earrings in Fatty's hand. "Fatty, what are you yelling for? You can get recovery earrings? Don't tell me you're lying." "That's right, Sam. You've gone crazy thinking about recovery earrings. How can a lousy merchant like you get recovery earrings?" "Ha!" Following everyone's laughter, Fatty Sam's old face also turned red, but the pair of earrings remained in his hand and refused to let go. In the crowd, A pretty female apprentice with a sweet smile suddenly walked to the front of the stall. "Sam, can I see this pair of earrings?" "This?" Fatty's facial muscles twitched slightly, and he looked like he wanted to slap himself. In the end, he helplessly opened his hand and showed the pair of exquisite earrings to the female apprentice. The girl, who had the strength of a mid-level apprentice, doubtfully picked up the magic earrings with her fingertips and felt them. Her face immediately revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. Under her control, the originally unremarkable magic earrings suddenly lit up with a dark green fluorescence, and the air began to fill with a faint fragrance of grass and wood. The sound of people sucking in a breath of cold air could be heard. They really are recovery earrings. My goodness, there are actually people selling level 3 magic items in the hall. No, I have to quickly inform Lena. She has long wanted a pair of recovery earrings. Yes, I also have to quickly inform the bot. Chapter 61. Grim rubbed his nose. He could not help but be shocked by the scene in front of him. Fatty Sam couldn't help but mutter to himself, "Oh no, if I knew it was a recovery earring, I wouldn't have yelled for it. If Boss Kern finds out, he's going to scold me to death." With that, he took out a round crystal ball and began to call someone in the distance. The chaos in the surroundings caused Grim to frown. He could not understand what was going on. Wasn't it just an ordinary recovery earring? How could it cause such commotion? However, his perception was still very sharp, and he quickly captured a crucial word from the surrounding acolytes' words. A level 3 magic item. Grim had only skimmed through some alchemy books. He had not studied the classification of magic items, so he was completely unfamiliar with this level 3 magic item. Just as he was hesitating, the pretty female acolyte finally spoke up. "Excuse me, which one of you is the owner of this pair of recovery earrings?" Fatty Sam had already put down the crystal ball dejectedly and pointed at Grim listlessly. Grim could only rub his nose and nod helplessly. "It's mine. How many magic crystals are you going to sell it for?" The female apprentice asked expectantly. "I'm not selling it." "Not selling? Why are you putting it out if you're not selling it?" "This item is only for exchange, not for sale. Plant-type items are not suitable for me. I want to exchange it for—" Before Grim could finish his words, the crowd suddenly clamored. As the crowd split to the left and right, a few strong men with heads full of sweat hurried over. The few of them were stunned when they met in front of the stall. Then, they glared at each other. "Boy from the Barton family, why is it you again? We saw it first today. Don't even think of taking it from us." A boorish man carried a giant sword on his back and wore a set of exquisite leather armor. As he spoke, he gave off a threatening aura. On the other side, the gray-robed apprentice did not dare to show any weakness. He said with a sinister expression, "You saw it first? Just based on your childish words, I can't be bothered to deal with you. The items on display here have always been sold to the highest bidder. If you have the ability, just buy everything here." The two of them were clearly the captains of a fixed team, and they were high-ranked apprentices themselves. Hence, when they clashed, the surging killing intent they emitted was suffocating. However, they were inside the wizard tower, so they didn't dare to really fight. They could only use this kind of spiritual pressure that contained a strong, personal momentum to constantly pressure each other. All right. You two are always like this when you meet. Since we've all encountered this pair of recovery earrings, let's all bid together and see who gets it in the end." Just when the two of them were evenly matched, another slightly gentler voice suddenly interjected. As the crowd parted, a young man in a red robe walked over. This person didn't look very old, but his face had the calm and steadiness of someone who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. He wasn't handsome, but he wasn't ugly either. He looked ordinary, and there was always a faint smile on his face. "I didn't expect Boss Kern to come as well. It's really going to be lively. Don't push. I'm waiting to watch the show." The crowd started to clamor again. The red-robed man turned around and scanned the area. Wherever his gaze landed, the clamor would immediately stop. Finally, he smiled warmly at the crowd. "All right, let's not make a ruckus. Since we've encountered a pair of recovery earrings today, and everyone is interested in buying them. Let's see who's lucky enough to win. Under the pressure of the red-robed man, the leaders of the other two teams could only withdraw their spiritual pressure. They walked to Grimm's stall and stared at the pair of earrings on the female apprentice's palm like a tiger watching its prey. This female acolyte was obviously a member of the swordsman's team. Hence, the moment he saw her, he beamed with joy. "Heidi, you have good taste. How about it? Did you get this pair of earrings? If you don't have enough magic crystals, we can pool some together. You must get it." The gray-robed and red-robed Kern couldn't help but frown. But he's not selling the earrings, he's only exchanging them. The female acolyte called Heidi couldn't help but stomp her feet. Exchanging? The three team leaders were stunned. Exchanging for what? Exchanging for fire-type magic items. The three of them fell silent. Where is this? The dark crypt. Fire-type materials were even rarer here, and fire-type magic items were extremely rare as well. However, the three team leaders were not people who would give up easily. They immediately tried to find a way out of Grimm's predicament, but were all firmly rejected by Grimm. While the team leaders were searching for fire-type magic items, Grimm finally found out from Sam the reason why the recovery earrings were so popular. For most of the beginner acolytes, although the resources in the dark crypt were more valuable, it was still too dangerous. Hence, most of the acolytes' training and activities were limited to the Krilla Mountains. Hunting magical beasts deep in the mountains, mining for magic herbs, and exploring secret areas were always accompanied by unpredictable dangers. Therefore, if a team member who was good at healing could bring along a member who was good at healing, it would definitely be a huge improvement for the team. If the members had to rely on hemostasis bombs and potions to recover from injuries, the cost would be too high, and it would greatly reduce the benefits of their training. At this time, a plant resuscitation spell would undoubtedly save them a lot of extra expenses. Moreover, once the plant energy in the recovery earrings was used up, they only needed to stay in the forest for a period of time, and it would automatically be replenished. Without a doubt, this made the earrings even more cost-effective. As for the so-called Level 3 magic items, it was the level of magic items that acolytes categorized. Level 1 magic items that had energy points between 10 to 20 after activation were Level 1 magic items. Most of the small accessories that acolytes successfully crafted were mostly Level 1 magic items. Level 2 magic items that had energy points between 20 to 30 were mostly Level 2 magic items. Some acolytes could occasionally craft premium items that had energy points between this level. Level 3 magic items that had energy points between 30 to 40 were mostly Level 3 magic items. Most of these items were made by official sorcerers, and they were considered alchemy practice items. However, in the hands of an acolyte, it could become a trump card that could help him rise to power. After listening to Fatty's explanation, Grimm could not help but be confused. Impossible. I personally tested it. This earring can only activate about 10 points of green life energy at most. It can't be considered a Level 3 magic item. After listening to Grimm's words, Fatty could not help but pat his shoulder and ask, "You didn't experiment with your own energy, did you? If you want to activate the recovery earring's maximum recovery ability, you first need to be in the forest, and secondly, it's best if you're a plant acolyte. If you, a fire acolyte, were to use it, the effect would definitely be greatly reduced." After hearing Fatty's words, Grimm finally understood. No wonder when he tried the earring, there was no reaction, but when the female acolyte tried it, there was an obvious green glow around her. There was indeed something wrong with the energy. Looking at the chaotic scene around him, Fatty shook his head and said, "Too chaotic, too chaotic. If this goes on, those bastards from the Law Enforcement Association will be attracted." He did not know if Fatty was a jinx, or if good things did not happen, bad things did. Outside the crowd, there was chaos again. Two intermediate acolytes wearing standard blue acolyte robes hurried over. "Who is it? Who is selling Level 3 magic equipment here? How dare you? Don't you know that all magic equipment above Level 2 belongs to our Murphy's Chamber of Commerce?" The young acolyte leading the group had a fierce look on his face. As soon as he rushed into the crowd, he stared at Fatty Sam fiercely. Obviously, he thought that Sam was the culprit. "It's you again, Sam. How dare you?" Sam protested with an indignant look. "Ryan, don't talk nonsense. This item is not mine. No matter how unreasonable you are, you can't blame it on your Lord Ba." The law enforcer called Rain's cold gaze moved from Sam to Grimm's calm face. His heart inexplicably skipped a beat. Although there were many acolytes in the Wizard Tower, he knew those with a bit of strength. But how did this beginner acolyte who suddenly appeared out of nowhere get a level 3 magic item? "Brat, you probably don't know the rules here." Rain stood in front of Grimm with his head held high. "In this Wizard Tower, all magic items above level 2 can only be sold to our Murphy's Chamber of Commerce. This is the witchcraft contract signed between our Chamber of Commerce and Wizard Howard. If you dare to disobey, you will be stripped of your acolyte status." Oomph. After saying that, he snatched the pair of earrings from the female acolyte's hand. After checking it in his hand, he nodded with satisfaction. "The quality of this pair of earrings is not bad. According to the rules of our Murphy's Chamber of Commerce, I will buy it at the market price. The price is—" Rain rolled his eyes. 15 magic crystals. Originally, he wanted to say 12 magic crystals, but seeing that there were too many acolytes around, he could only bite his teeth and raise the price a little. But even so, when the price of 15 magic crystals came out, the acolytes in the crowd suddenly became noisy. "Why don't he go rob someone? Oh my God, only 15 magic crystals. You can't even buy a level 1 magic item with this price. Yeah, this is daylight robbery." The agitated apprentices had obviously angered the blue-robed Rain. "All of you shut up. This is the agreement between our Chamber of Commerce and Wizard Howard. Who dares to question it? If anyone dares to talk nonsense again, I will immediately report his name to the wizard on duty." Chapter 62. Seeing that the crowd had finally calmed down, blue-robed Rain nodded with satisfaction. At this moment, the follower behind him suddenly pulled his sleeve and gestured towards Grimm's stall with his mouth. "Sir Rain, why do I feel that those items are not ordinary equipment?" Rain bent down to take a closer look and found that those items were indeed extraordinary. Chirping frog, elven boots, wood root. Every time he said a name, everyone in the hall suddenly gasped. When they heard the name wood root, the few apprentices who were proficient in plants couldn't help but put their hands on their chests, as if their hearts were about to break into 8 pieces. Fatty Sam's expression was as ugly as if his father had died, and he looked like he was about to die. As for the few team leaders, they completely gave up on the idea of keeping the treasures and pulled the crowd to the side to watch the show. They were very clear that if a beginner apprentice was extremely lucky, it was possible for him to get a level 3 magic item. But if this beginner apprentice could take out 2 or 3 of them at once, it was definitely not something that could be controlled by luck. Such a beginner apprentice was either very capable or had a powerful force. Either way, they couldn't afford to offend him. Perhaps only Rain, who was too greedy, couldn't see such a simple reality. Sure enough, after seeing so many level 3 magic items at once, Rain couldn't stay calm and reached out to grab a few of them. Asterisk slap. Asterisk his wrist was grabbed by a big hand from the side. "Sir, I don't think you have the right to forcefully buy my things." Grimm couldn't stand the clumsy performance of these clowns and directly stopped him. "What? You dare to disagree? Every apprentice who makes a living in this Wizard Tower knows that all level 3 magic items are bought by our Murphy's Chamber of Commerce. If you dare to sell them here, it's against the rules. Be careful, or I'll arrest you." Sir, the agreement that your Murphy's Chamber of Commerce signed with the Wizards seems to be limited to the members of the Wizard Tower. But I'm not a member of your Wizard Tower, and these items are not produced by your Wizard Tower. Why, do you still want to forcefully take them? Kid, don't try to fool me. You're not a member of this Wizard Tower. How did you get in? Let go of me or else. Otherwise what? Otherwise, I will take you to the Law Enforcement Association and teach you a good lesson. Haha. If you really intend to do that, I'm afraid you'll lose face later." Grim grinded his teeth and laughed. He was annoyed by this blind guy. "What, are you planning to fight?" As Rain said, he patted his waist. Black and coarse hair suddenly grew on his fair face, while his whole body vaguely swelled up. "Beast transformation." Grim frowned and took 2 steps back. With a swipe of his finger, he took out 2 summoning cores from his storage belt. Just as he was hesitating whether or not to make a move, a cold shout came from outside the crowd. "All of you stop." The voice sounded familiar. With the I Chip's prompt, Grim immediately realized who it was. Thus, he thought of something and clenched his right hand. He did not rush to throw out the summoning core crystal. To be honest, today's situation was not suitable for the demon crocodile hunters to fight. First of all, there was no soil in the hall. It would be difficult to rely on the earth elemental essence absorbed from the space to form it. Moreover, the demon crocodile hunters were his trump cards. The more secretive it was, the more effective it would be in battle. Thus, he really did not want to reveal it unless it was absolutely necessary. Just as the 2 of them were confronting each other, a person strode in from outside the crowd. From the way the crowd bowed when they saw him, it seemed that he was a well-known figure here. Lord Kevin. Lord Kevin. As the acolytes bowed, Kevin the Black Hand, a high-ranked acolyte who had met Grim before, walked in between them. Seeing that it was Kevin Rain, who had just completed his beast transformation, let out a low growl and bared his teeth as he removed his beast form. "Lord Kevin, why have you come?" The blue-robed enforcer Rain bowed and greeted him. The young but prestigious Kevin the Black Hand did not bother with Rain at all. Instead, he nodded at Grim and squatted down in front of the stall, fiddling with the items. Elven boots, chirping frog would root. Good heavens, all level 3 items. No wonder they went crazy. Why did I hear that there's a recovery earring? That, Lord, the recovery earring is here. Rain handed over the recovery earring while stammering. All right. Kevin took the earring and threw it back into the stall. Instead, he picked up the witchcraft notes and flipped through a few pages. Finally, Kevin raised his head and sighed. "I heard that someone killed the Demon Vine Lady underground when I just came back. I couldn't believe it. I didn't expect you to even get her witchcraft notes. Did you take all this equipment from her? The younger generation will surpass us in time." "Demon Vine Lady? Are you talking about the woman who can transform her body? She was killed by Lord Mary, and Lord Mary asked me to sell this equipment." "Mary? That transformed vampire?" Kevin pondered for a while and chose to believe Grimm's explanation. After all, a junior acolyte killing a notorious high-grade fallen acolyte was hard to explain from any angle. "Pack up the things here. Follow me. You can't find what you want here. I'll bring you to where you should be." After saying this, he helped Grim roll up the cloth and wrapped it up before leaving. He completely ignored the blue-robed enforcer Rain during the entire process. Only when the 2 of them disappeared from sight did the hall once again burst into heated discussions. A few team leaders even pulled Fatty Sam to one side and interrogated him about the origins of that mysterious young man. However, all of this was meaningless to Grim, as he was completely shocked by what he saw. Kevin had brought him to a small training camp outside the Magus Tower. To reach there, they had to rely on flying mounts. Hence, under Kevin's guidance, Grim rode on a magic beast called the Socratic Eagle for the first time. The Socratic Eagle was a high-grade acolyte wind-type magic beast. It was 3 meters tall and had a wingspan of 5 meters. It had a strong body and a few wind-type spells, such as Wind Blade and Wind Vortex. It was a rare overlord of the skies and the forest. It was precisely because these magical beasts were strong and fast that they were captured and tamed by magi to become high-quality flying mounts. It would be a lie to say that Grim was not nervous about leaving the ground for the first time. When the exceptionally majestic eagle with golden feathers soared into the sky, Grim gripped the soft feathers on the back of the eagle's neck tightly. His heart almost jumped out of his throat. Kevin, who was leading the way on the other eagle, looked back and laughed loudly. Evidently, he was not unfamiliar with this scene. Grim kept his eyes shut until the eagle stopped accelerating and spread its wings to soar into the blue sky. Only then did he let go of his sweaty hands and try to open his eyes. For the first time, Grim felt that the sky was so close to him. The white clouds floated above his head like cotton candy. Below him were steep mountains and ravines, undulating valleys and jungles, dense and lush forests. Occasionally, he could see some large birds chirping and flying close to the branches of the trees. This made Grim, who had been immersed in deception for a long time, feel a lot more relaxed. To be honest, after spending so much time in the gloomy swamp tower, Grim felt that his body and mind had deteriorated. He could no longer find the carefree attitude he had when he first transmigrated here. As he relaxed, the anxiety he felt from flying for the first time began to fade. Grim sat cross-legged on the eagle's back, and even had the mood to appreciate the magnificent scenery below him. Fortunately, he did not have a fear of heights. If a future great magus was afraid of heights, it would be a stain in his life that he would never be able to erase. The training camp was not far away, about 30 miles away from the Wizard Tower. It was located in a quiet valley surrounded by mountains. The two Socratic eagles flapped their wings and slowly descended. Although Grim's face was a little pale, he looked much better than when he took off. Kevin walked down from the eagle and tossed a magic crystal to the eagle. The eagle caught it in its mouth and swallowed it in a few bites. The eagle that Grim was riding on also looked at him coldly. This was probably the cost of riding a flying mount. Grim followed Kevin's example and tossed a magic crystal to the eagle. Only then did the eagle's anger turn into joy. It swallowed the magic crystal in a few bites and slowly walked to an empty space on the side. Let's go. I'll show you the real circle of friends. We're from a different world compared to those in the hall. There's no benefit in hanging out with them, and you won't be able to get what you want there. Kevin spread his arms and made a hugging gesture. Only here can you find your value. This is the future of combat magi. Ugh, what an exciting opening announcement. It was a pity that there was no warm applause, so the atmosphere was a little awkward. Before Grim could figure out how to deal with this situation, a burst of laughter and curses came from afar. Sickening Kevin, why are you doing this again? Why? Who are you trying to trick into your team? Bring him here quickly and let me, Baldy Afu, have a look. Chapter 63. The training camp covered a large area, but there were not many buildings around. On the east side was a row of sturdy wooden huts, all made of thick logs. They looked crude, but they were very sturdy and practical. On the west side were a few scattered tents. Judging from their size, they were only big enough for 1 or 2 people to rest. The most eye-catching thing in the camp was the large training ground and the countless apprentices fighting on it. Yes, he was a sorcerer apprentice, not an ordinary human warrior. Seeing the fireball as big as a bowl streaking across the field like a meteor and the terrifying figure with a battle axe in hand, Grim's heart began to beat violently again. Up until now, Grim had always felt that wizarding apprentices were dark, cunning, and twisted psychopaths. However, this was the first time he had seen someone who was as passionate as he was today, using his own violent witchcraft to confront someone in broad daylight. A large group of people had gathered around a large training ground to watch the battle between 2 high-level apprentices. One was a long-range spellcaster who specialized in fire spells, just like Grim. The other was a body refiner, a terrifying god of war who had powerful lightning powers. The two of them fought back and forth in the field, and it was hard to tell who would win. The fire apprentice's body was surrounded by 3 constantly rotating flame shields, which helped him block a large amount of sputtering mud and gravel, as well as lightning bolts that resembled giant silver snakes. Under his feet, there was a strange spell formation that was faintly discernible. This spell formation obviously had some kind of acceleration effect, which allowed him to run as fast as those apprentices who specialized in agility. Meanwhile, the dense fireball that gathered between his palms continuously split into exploding fireballs one after another, bombarding his opponent like a meteor shower. As for the berserk warrior apprentice, he relied on his strong body and the lightning net that covered his body to withstand the continuous bombardment of fireballs. He kept roaring and sprinting, trying his best to catch up to the fire apprentice. Looking at the terrifying lightning on the huge axe, as long as he got close, even if it was just a little closer, the thunder axe that he threw out could instantly injure his weak opponent. Grim followed Kevin to the edge of the field. Before he even got close, he could already smell the pungent smell of lightning burning the air, and his ears were filled with the roar of fireballs exploding. Although the arena was large enough, it was still too small for the violent and ferocious witchcraft. Some of the fireballs even flew out of the arena and headed straight for the crowd of onlookers. At this moment, it was a festive moment for the audience. Some of them took out their wands, and with a blast of cold air, they froze the incoming fireball into a block of ice. Some of them jumped up and cut the fireballs into a sky full of fireflies the moment they brushed past them. Everyone who came out to show off their witchcraft won a series of cheers from the crowd. The bold voice that mocked Kevin just now was standing in the middle of this group of people. He had a bald head, a strong body, and a body full of muscles that were as solid as iron ingots. Although he was standing there barehanded, he gave off an indomitable pressure. This was a quasi-wizard apprentice. The pressure he gave off was so strong that it was almost tangible. Standing next to him, Grim found it hard to even breathe. The chip in his mind had already started to ring a series of ear-piercing warnings. Warning, warning. High-frequency spiritual radiation detected. Please move away from the source of the radiation immediately, or else your spiritual power will weaken in 3 seconds. Countdown begins. 3, 2, 1. Grim could not help but frown and smile bitterly. In this high-magic sorcerer world, from the beginning of the sorcerer apprenticeship period, the apprentices began to accumulate magic elements through meditation and the consumption of magic potions. The more elemental particles they gathered, the more powerful the spiritual radiation they formed would be. This might be something that they were used to, but for ordinary people, this kind of spiritual radiation with strong elemental characteristics was no less than the nuclear radiation on Earth. Apprentices could only be regarded as nuclear materials or nuclear waste. Although they were dangerous, their strength was limited. But for official sorcerers, once they crossed the threshold of qualitative change, they could go from nuclear materials to nuclear reactors. The level of danger was not on the same level at all. However, this bald man in front of him, who seemed to be smiling, was definitely a quasi-wizard who was about to break through to become a sorcerer. Even a junior apprentice like Grim found it hard to withstand the terrifying spiritual radiation emitted by Garen when he got a little closer. After greeting Kevin, the bald Afu's gaze fell on Grim. But with a sweep of his eyes, his squarish face, which seemed to be cast from steel, also revealed a trace of confusion. How come it's a junior apprentice? Could it be that the underground black bastards had eaten the cadaveric worms and were defeated by a beginner apprentice? You, Blackwood, go and test his skills. The bald Afu was obviously the one in charge of this camp. Without any explanation, he picked an opponent for Grim. Hey, you two, aren't you tired after jumping around in the field for so long? Hurry up and come down. There's a new game coming up. Very soon, under the bald Afu's shout, the two senior apprentices who were sweating profusely came down from the field with their bodies covered in wounds. It could be seen that this was not the first time they had fought, so they had a good understanding of each other's abilities. Before the other showed an obvious opening, both sides had the opportunity to win, but it was difficult for them to grasp it. The Thunder Giant who came down from the field was covered in burns of various sizes. While receiving treatment from others, he asked loudly in a muffled voice, "Where did this junior apprentice come from? Boss, are you trying to kill him by asking him to come down? His body is as weak as a bean sprout. I'm afraid he won't be able to handle it." The bald Afu was the first to let out an earth-shattering laugh. "Mark, don't brag shamelessly here. Do you know that this tiny beginner apprentice killed the demonic vine woman with his own hands? What? Who among you senior apprentices dares to say that they can beat the demon vine girl for sure?" Hearing Ah Fu's words, the confused crowd all turned to look at Grim, who was smiling bitterly, as if they wanted to see through him. Grim opened his mouth and wanted to explain. However, Kevin lightly patted his shoulder and whispered in his ear, "Little fellow, I'll teach you a lesson this time. If you don't want others to pry into your secrets, remember to completely destroy your enemy's soul next time." Grim gaped for a long time. Only then did he realize where he had given himself away. Damn it, it was the demon Vine Girl's corpse. He and Mary had only killed her, but did not extract or destroy her soul. After handing her corpse over to the Magus Tower, the Magi must have discovered his secrets through the remnants of her soul. Shit, shit, shit. At this moment, Grim wanted to slap himself in the face and cry bitterly for his thoughtlessness. At the same time, he felt a sense of helplessness towards the strange spells of this strange world. There were countless types of witchcraft, and their strange effects were impossible to guard against. It seemed that his plan of hiding behind Mary and getting rich was about to be foiled. Today, he had no choice but to show off his abilities. His most powerful ability was something they couldn't fathom, and what they thought was only the most insignificant part of himself. After making up his mind, Grim gave up on the idea of continuing to hide. A strange smile appeared on his face. "All right, since you want to see my abilities, then send out your fighters. Let him come out and show me who my opponent is." Sorry, your opponent is me. My name is Blackwood." A low and hoarse voice rang out from the crowd, and an old apprentice with a stooped back and a long ebony staff in his hand walked out. His skin was loose and cracked, and his body was thin and shriveled. His face was cold and fierce, and his hair was yellow and withered. His hands and feet were black and dirty, and his black, curved nails were like eagle hooks. He smiled at Grim, revealing a mouth full of yellow and broken teeth. At the top of the ebony staff in his left hand hung a string of teeth and shrunken skulls. As the cold wind blew, they clanked against each other. Looking at his age, he seemed to be nearing the end of his life, and looked like a human skeleton about to enter his grave. However, Grim's gaze suddenly froze, and his expression gradually turned serious. Although this guy called Blackwood only had the mental energy of a high-grade acolyte, he could clearly feel the threat of death. If he guessed correctly, the other party should be a terrifying fellow who had a good relationship with negative energy. Now, he did not know if this guy was a corpse or a terrifying enemy who played with curses. Perhaps he could only experience his true abilities bit by bit in the dueling arena. Hee, isn't it a bit unfair for you to let a high-grade acolyte fight a beginner acolyte like me? Since you want to test me, you can't not pay a price. There's no harm in placing some stakes before the battle. Grim crossed his arms in front of his chest, looking full of confidence. Kid, you're very arrogant. Blackwood once again revealed a cold smile. Sir Afu only wanted to see how long you could last against me. What, do you still think you have a chance of winning? Kakik, what if I win? Do you dare to make a bet with me? Grim took the opportunity to counterattack. Why wouldn't I dare? For the sake of your courage, I could give you 10-1 odds. No matter how many magic crystals you bet, as long as you can win, I'll return 10 times the amount. Blackwood's smile and his skeletal head were terrifying. Who else wants to bet with me? Show me your courage. Grim howled as he threw out all his belongings, the black bag and the remaining 9 magic crystals. Chapter 64. They had seen arrogant people before, but they had never seen someone this arrogant. A little beginner acolyte actually dared to challenge a group of elite law enforcers, whose lowest rank was an advanced acolyte. This was undoubtedly something that provoked everyone's nerves. The elite acolytes grinned as they accepted the challenge. They continuously cheered Blackwood on, encouraged him, and threatened him. They urged him to teach this arrogant brat a lesson. As more and more bets piled up on the side of the field, the crowd's interest grew. They even pushed the bald-headed Afu to the side and crowded around the 2 people who had bet on the fight as they entered the field. Looking at his excited companions, bald Afu's expression became strange. He secretly pulled the black-handed Kevin to the side. Brat, this person is recommended by you. Don't make a big mess for me. Do you really think he has a chance of winning? Air. According to the soul memory that Wizard Angus extracted, this Grim has an earth element puppet creature that's quite powerful. Perhaps, if he were to display his full strength, it would be possible for him to remain undefeated. But if he wants to defeat Hey Moo, that would be impossible. After getting a satisfactory answer, Bald Afu couldn't help but become excited. Little ones, spread out and make room for them. Don't let that brat go back on his words. Come, Minsa, tally up the bets. Remember to add in my bet. I'll bet 200 magic crystals on Blackwood's victory. Bald Afu's roar echoed through the arena, and the atmosphere in the arena instantly exploded. Strange yells and roars rose one after another, and the name Blackwood floated everywhere. At this moment, Grim and Blackwood had already entered the arena. They stood in front of each other about 100 meters apart. Looking at Grim, who was calmly preparing for battle, Blackwood grinned, revealing his incomplete yellow teeth. He sneered and said, Brat, you've got guts, but I hope that you won't be lying in a pool of blood and howling in pain later. Don't worry, as long as you're willing to lie on the ground and admit your ignorance, I'll consider sparing your life. Kakik. Facing his opponent's verbal attack, Grim coldly threw out his summoning crystal core. Today's location was very suitable. Although the ground beneath his feet had been hardened by magic, it was still mud. In the next moment, a huge amount of earth element gathered, and a hazy, illusory figure gradually appeared in front of everyone. Isn't this a little too big? Seeing the gigantic demon crocodile hunter gradually appear in the field, the cheers from the sidelines began to die down, and the crowd began to feel a little restless. This kid is a summoner? Why did they summon such a big guy? As the earth element gathered, the demon crocodile hunter's body became more and more solid. Its huge body and ferocious appearance began to appear in front of everyone. Grim stepped forward and sat on the crocodile's back. Damn it, this kid really has some skill. Blackwood cursed inwardly as he quickly prepared his own witchcraft. As this was a duel under the watchful eyes of the crowd, both sides could prepare support spells in advance, but they could not attack the opponent beforehand. Therefore, Blackwood's witchcraft was mainly for support and summoning. As Blackwood's ebony staff shook, the many small ornaments tied to the end of the staff collided with each other, emitting a crisp sound. The ornaments that resembled the sharp teeth of magical beasts and the skull of a human exploded with white light, quickly condensing into two terrifying white bone shields around his body. The white bone shields were made up of countless white bones, and on the surface of the shields was a malevolent and distorted skull. Two balls of green flames floated in the skull's eye sockets, and its upper and lower jaw constantly opened and closed. It looked terrifying, as if it was about to choose a person to devour. Blackwood quickly chanted an incantation, and an extremely strange black halo appeared in his empty right palm. Its purpose was unknown. Are you all ready? Fu's roar reverberated throughout the field. When he saw the two nodding silently, Fu roared loudly. Then I announced the start of the duel. As soon as the duel was announced, the black halo in Blackwood's hand trembled inexplicably. On the other side, Grim, who was already on guard, sensed the incoming attack through his elemental sight. A curse-type attack. Only curse-type attacks could be so formless and difficult to defend against. Grim stood high on the crocodile, his short apprentice robes fluttering in the breeze. Under the exquisite, noble headband on his forehead, a pair of eyes flashed with blue light as he stared unwaveringly at Blackwood, who was 100 meters away. If it was someone else, perhaps they would have been hit by Blackwood's sneak attack while they were still baffled. However, with Grim's elemental sight that could see through all magical elements, he could see everything clearly. A formless and strange black lasso was thrown out from the halo in Blackwood's hand, following a strange arc as it flew towards him. At this moment, the shrieking twig in Grim's bosom that he had prepared beforehand sounded continuously. However, Grim's attention was not diverted by the shrieking twig at all. Instead, he focused on the I, Chip's prompt in his mind. Warning, warning. Malicious spiritual force has been detected. Please leave immediately, or else you will suffer a curse-type attack. According to the current spell database, there is a 71% chance of mental confusion, a 26% chance of mental retardation, and a 3% chance of a soulworm. It turned out that curse-type spells required one to first use spiritual force to lock onto the target. Only then could one establish a hidden spiritual channel and use the curse on the target, saving the time needed for the spell to manifest. This was probably the main reason why curse-type attacks were so hard to intercept or counter halfway. Understanding dawned on him. The crocodile under Grimm's feet was connected to his mind, and it immediately chose to take half a step back the instant the black lasso was about to reach him. The native hunter took the black lasso in place of Grimm. In the next second, the black halo in Blackwood's hand exploded and disappeared. A ball of smoke erupted from the native hunter's body, turning into a black skull that circled around its body and entered its body. Damn it, it was ineffective. That fellow was a summoned elemental puppet. Blackwood immediately sensed that his curse attack had not landed on the spiritual body. He cursed angrily in a low voice, his claw-like right hand gesturing as he prepared to cast the next spell. However, at this moment, Grimm's attack had already neared him. The native hunter on top of the crocodile waved its hands, condensing earth elemental spears into the air and hurling them at Blackwood, causing the white bone shield around him to tremble. Immediately after, a flame spear condensed from pure fire elemental energy pierced through the air and pierced the white bone shield. In the next second, the frantic elemental flames engulfed the small area where Blackwood was standing. At the same time, many elite acolytes could not help but look at each other in astonishment. The strength of this attack and the form of this spell did not seem to be at the level of a beginner acolyte. Such a rapid casting speed and an attack strength of 32 points. Was this something a beginner acolyte could do? The crowd could not help but fall silent and began to treat this slightly joking bet more cautiously. The acolytes outside the arena could sense that something was wrong, and Blackwood, who was surrounded by the earth and flame spears, felt it even more deeply. Damn it, it's actually a three-way siege of earth, fire, and physical attacks. As the violent flames spread around his body, the white bone shield, which had been struck until it was trembling, showed signs of collapsing. Blackwood's expression darkened, and he hurriedly used his consciousness to replace the one in front of him with another white bone shield. He gritted his teeth and took out a few pieces of black rotten meat from his waist pouch, casually throwing them at his feet. In the next moment, just as Grimm was about to charge forward with the huge demon crocodile, intending to crush his opponent with its huge body, a strange figure rushed out from the lingering flames. The figure crawled on the ground and pounced at the demon crocodile in a completely different way. This was a terrifying 2-meter-tall patchwork corpse. It had a deathly pale body, 2 heads, 5 arms, and 7 legs, and its entire body looked like a monster that had been randomly pieced together from a few human corpses. It crawled on the ground, its 5 arms and 7 legs moving at the same time, and its running trajectory was unpredictable. It nimbly dodged a few earth spears thrown at it, and quickly closed in on the advancing crocodile. The heavy front limbs of the crocodile landed heavily on the ground, causing the ground beneath its feet to shake and ripple. The patchwork corpse that had just charged in front of it was immediately hit, its entire body swaying unstably. Asterisk whoosh, asterisk a strong gust of wind blew, and the crocodile opened its mouth wide, pouncing forward and biting the patchwork corpse. It closed its mouth, and its sharp barbed teeth instantly crushed the corpse. With a muffled sound, the patchwork corpse exploded into black blood that covered the crocodile's entire head. Under Grimm's horrified gaze, the earth element that had been pieced together to form the crocodile's head instantly collapsed. Tons of soil lost their restraints and fell to the ground. Damn it, what a powerful corrosive black blood. It could even corrode and neutralize elemental particles. However, the control crystal of the crocodile was clearly not in its head. Otherwise, if the black blood had contaminated the crystal, Grimm's trump card would have been destroyed. The crocodile that had lost its head was still moving forward with all its might. Dense earth element once again gathered in front of its body, and the outline of a new head was now clearly visible. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.